have a garden in Rossmore. I need to reach out to them. That's one place. I'm trying to make sure we have plenty of community gardens throughout the county. And Rossmore there's nothing there. So I need to check into that. Thanks for the heads up.
So Nancy, I do think this is it for Planning Commission tonight. I know Commissioner Heising had a last minute work conflict, and Vice Chair Lavange is also traveling for work tonight.
Okay. You are now live on YouTube, and I'll start the recording.
Okay, are we good? Okay, welcome everybody. Today is May 16th. Welcome to the Lafayette Planning Commission meeting. It is 7:01. We'll call the meeting to order. And we will start with a roll call vote. I will note for the record that Commissioner Heising is out tonight and Vice Chair Lavange is also out tonight. So with that, Commissioner Farsan.
Here, thank you. Nice to see everybody.
Oh, wait. Yeah, I have to do a roll call. Sorry, lost my train of thought for a second. Commissioner Maggio.
Here.
Commissioner Mason.
Present.
Commissioner Sturm.
Present.
And Chair Radnich. I'm present. We can move to item 3, adoption of the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Farzan, second by Commissioner Mason, and we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Farzan,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
and Chair Radnich, aye. Item 4, public comments. This is for items not on an upcoming agenda or not on tonight's agenda. So if you have a comment you'd like to share for the Delamar project or for the capital improvement program, we can wait until those items. But if you would like to make a comment, there's instructions on page 1 of tonight's agenda. So I will look to staff to see if we have any hands raised for public comments.
If anyone has any comments for items not on the agenda, please use the raise hand function or *9. There's one raised hand, Marianne Heisington will be promoting it as panelist.
Okay. Nancy, as the speakers coming in, just to let you know, I don't know if it's just me, but it sounded a little jumbled or really fast when you were speaking. So maybe we'll just kind of keep an eye on it. I see Commissioner Sturm also shaking her, nodding. So we'll let you know, but
Okay.
Maybe can you repeat who the speaker is?
Marianne Heisington.
Okay, thanks.
Having trouble promoting her to panelist, but she's not joining. So I'm gonna see if she can talk from the attendees.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Oh,
Welcome.
I just want to take a minute. Well, I would like to take a long time, but it'll only take a minute to thank Karen for what she's done on this commission and what she's done for our city for so many years. And it sounds like you're going to be very happy with what you're doing, and that makes us all happy. But thank you for everything you've done for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. That's very sweet. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. We all agree as well. Are there any other public comments?
No, I didn't see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. We'll close the public comments, item 4, and move to item 5 of the consent calendar. So this is recommended approval of the meeting minutes from April 18th. Get a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Farzan, second by Commissioner Maggio, and a roll call vote. Commissioner Farzan,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
Chair Radnich, aye. Thank you. And we can move to item 6, continued public hearings. So item 6A, HDP 32-21 Delamar R20 zoning. And tonight we're going to the staff has a presentation for tonight's item. Joshua is on. We're going to review the project, conduct a public hearing, provide direction to the applicant, and then likely continue the item to a date certain to follow the application so that there's an opportunity to respond to commissioners' comments tonight and to submit a full revised arborist report. So Joshua, I'll turn over to you.
All righty, let me pull up my presentation. Nancy, can you allow screen sharing, please? Perfect. All right, can everyone see my screen all right?
Yes.
Perfect. So as Chair Radnich mentioned, this is the second hearing for HDP 32-21, Delamar residence, which, to just give a brief overview again, is a phase 1 hillside development permit for the construction of an approximately 3,600 square foot home, new home in the hillside overlay district on a private portion of Los Arabes Drive. And so this was heard in April, I believe at the April 18th Planning Commission meeting. And it was continued from that meeting for to allow responses for feedback, including looking at clarification on whether the garage is considered a story per the definition in our municipal code, looking at ways to minimize the number of trees proposed to be removed, and that would be optimal, and also looking further at visibility and privacy impacts based on the massing, landscaping, etc., as well as to provide more time to submit a new arborist report as recommended by the city's consulting arborist, Penn Phillips. And so the applicant did clarify in the plans, updated information, provided more clarifying information, especially to the site plan, as well as added new additional renderings of a 3D mock-up of the home relative to the terrain. They also did make revisions addressing the 2 tests of whether the garage could be considered a story or not, and hired a new arborist to provide a new arborist report. They did submit a preliminary report that has been included as an attachment in the staff report, but the full report, I spoke with the arborist, is still pending. So we can jump right into the first question about whether the garage is considered a story, and there was some conversation about the aspects of the definition and that there are 2 tests within the definition. So for these main 2 tests, and to remind people, this is from section 6-354 of our municipal code, which is the definition of a story. And in that definition, there are 2 specific tests. The first test is for whether the finished floor level directly above a basement, cellar, or unused underfloor space is more than 6 feet above the ground adjacent to the building for more than 50% of the total perimeter. So what that bundle of words says is essentially looking at the perimeter of the garage and then taking the portions of it that are above 6 feet. If the proportion of that to the perimeter of the garage is larger than 50%, then it is considered a story. Staff took the revised plan set and did calculations based on the definition. So for the perimeter, looking at least from this one section view, elevation view, looking at what is above 6 feet, took it all around and then divided that by the perimeter, and that came out to approximately 42%. So by the first test, it's not considered a story, which brings us then to the second test, which says that or more than 12 feet is above ground at any point. Such basement, cellar, unused underfloor space shall be considered a story. And for clarification, the ground that is referred to in this definition, the general interpretation from planning staff has historically been ground is finished or existing grade, whichever one is considered lower. So for this test, staff took the finished grade, which is the lowest in this iteration relative to the existing topography, took the measurement from this section, from the bottom of this concrete pouring, which would be the top of the graded area, up to the first floor elevation here, and that measurement came out to approximately 11.5 feet. So by the second test, it is also not considered a story. So therefore, the garage would not be considered a story, and the building would therefore still comply with the height requirements for the zoning district it's in. And then the second component was for privacy and visual impacts. So for this, the applicant provided a series of additional renderings relative to the site included in the plan set. So they added some 3D rendered views of what it would look like opposite Los Arabas Drive, from the bottom of the driveway going up the driveway, and then from the, I believe from the top of the driveway for the downhill neighbor 4146, or I'm sorry, for the adjacent neighbor 4146. And generally, the stepping with the terrain is a favorable strategy for development in Lafayette, especially in the hillside. Building with the contours is in our residential design guidelines for developing homes in the hillside. Staff does welcome the commissioner comments on potential privacy visibility impacts with these updated plans, and also relative to public comments. And then there also is the landscaping component, of course, which is more defined and evaluated in phase 2, but could still be discussed, especially with existing trees in the phase 1 component. And then speaking of existing trees, the applicant did submit a new preliminary arborist report prepared by Todd McNeil, who is an ISA certified arborist. And his report went in depth about the trees on site. They did a full inventory of the trees, and the report detailed the evaluation criteria for those, including discussing at length conditions of multiple specimens that are on the site. And then the table assigned certain grades to the trees based on health, suitability, and structure, and then a determination of what the impact on the tree would be for the construction. So the report then also did explore tree protection measures and best practices during the construction that would take place. Those also would be evaluated in phase 2, but the arborist did mention that this is a preliminary report and would be submitting a full report once he could do trenching and subterranean evaluations of the tree's roots. And this report has not yet been reviewed by the city's consulting arborist, but at least with a preliminary review by staff, using at least my knowledge of arborist reports and interpretation of trees, this one is a lot more robust than what was originally submitted in the application. So moving on, we did receive one public comment before the publication of the staff report. That one was opposed to the current siding and massing and included a supplemental material for the commissioners to read. And then once the staff report was published, we did receive multiple public comments from neighbors along Los Erebus Drive, all of which were opposed to the existing iteration with concerns for massing, visibility, sighting, privacy impacts as well. And those comments were uploaded to the city website if they were received before 4 p.m. And then all comments received prior to 5 p.m. And I checked my inbox right before this, that is all of them, were forwarded to the Planning Commission to review before the meeting. So the staff recommendation for this hearing today is for the commission to review the proposed project, conduct a public hearing, and continue the application to a date certain to allow the applicant to respond to feedback concerning visibility and privacy impacts, and to submit the full revised arborist report from their arborist. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Joshua. Are there any questions, clarifying questions for staff before we move to the applicant's presentation? So first Commissioner Maggio and then Commissioner Mason.
Yeah, my first question is, what is the schedule for this particular application after it leaves the Planning Commission? Is this project going to design review?
Yes, so this is a hillside development permit for a new home. So this is the phase 1 to establish the siding and massing. Then there is a mandated phase 2, which the design components, including the roof line, the roof pitch, fenestrations, color materials, landscaping, those components will be evaluated by the Design Review Commission. So similar to Chopra, the phase 1 was established for the siding and massing, and then the phase 2 happens with the Design Review Commission.
Okay, great. And at that time, would the design of the hammerhead also be taken up with GRC?
That is a good question. I know this has been an existing point of contention, at least with the development of the property. Generally, the fire safety infrastructure is not necessarily within the purview of the hillside development permit process, but we do refer all the projects to the fire district, especially for new homes. But at least in my experience, it's not necessarily an integrated component, at least us commenting on the proposed fire infrastructure, because it's not necessarily within the wheelhouse of the planning department's interpretation on the application. We usually defer to the fire district for that.
Okay, and so the hammerhead, the actual hammerhead looks like it's on the applicant's property, but what's going to be required is a turning into another neighbor's driveway to make that turn complete. So I'm assuming that the cost of developing the hammerhead falls to the applicant?
It is a private stretch of Los Erebus. I do not know if there is a road maintenance agreement. Some private easement areas have a road maintenance agreement that is usually recorded with the county, and it may come up in a title report. I don't believe there is one for Los Erebus, so it may mean that the cost of the improvements would solely fall to the applicant, but that's more of a private land use matter as well.
Okay, so the bulk of the hammerhead, I think, would be in some sort of an easement, although it's a private road. So what would the restrictions be on the use of that hammerhead? Like people having parties couldn't park in it? What are some of the things to consider with that hammerhead?
Yeah, so the hammerhead, as I understand it, the hammerhead is being prescribed as a component of the approval. So for the fire district, for their access, and they've been having conversations with the fire district before they submitted and before I became the staff planner for this. But at least to my understanding, And I'm sure the applicant would be able to elaborate on those conversations more, but I believe that the hammerhead is part of the fire district's approval in order to provide adequate fire access per the current fire code. So the properties beforehand were built with earlier fire codes, and this one would need to be built with the current fire code. And then in turn, the infrastructure of this private area needs to be, I guess, for a colloquial term, up to snuff for a new development. That's at least what I gathered from Chris Bachman at the prior hearing and from just the interpretation of the application.
Okay, so, but my assumption would be, since it's vital to emergency use, it would have to remain open and unparked.
Yes, it could not be like a staging area for, like, if a person is having a party, they would have to maintain clearance of the
Okay.
road. I don't know if that would involve signage that's mandated by the fire district to keep that access open,
Mhm.
but that may be a component. I would defer to the fire district for
Okay.
if they put any conditions or regulations on how that hammerhead would be used.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Maggio. Commissioner Mason?
Thank you. There's a lot of pieces to this. I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and there's a couple areas where I'm not sure if I'm missing something or something isn't there. So please walk me through the hammerhead again, because as I see it, we've got the hammerhead. It is, and then we're going to back into somebody's driveway. In my neighborhood, in a lot of places, there are gates across the driveway. I'm assuming that those are just approved conditionally through administratively through the city. I don't see anything, and I don't see an EVA, any reference to an EVA easement across the driveway, which would prevent somebody from putting a gate. If you put a gate there, you don't have the driveway. If you don't have the driveway, you don't have the EVA access. So I'm trying to understand the whole mechanisms of what's there, or am I just missing something?
Commissioner Mason, that is a very good question. I'm unsure on how that relationship would work. I don't know the original easement agreement for that private portion of Los Erebus, whether there's a codified easement with certain regulations in it, including relations to fire regulations for fire access. Forgive me, I'm just not familiar with that aspect. And also, there's a bit of a multi-jurisdictional aspect to this question as well, where the fire district has certain regulations for the hammerhead and fire safety, and whether those overlap with other access regulations, I'm not sure. Again, I would defer to the fire district for that relationship. In terms of the hammerhead being built on someone else's property, in that sense, there obviously would need to be consent given to install those improvements onto someone else's property, whether that is a certain agreement for access. If the downhill neighbor where the driveway is wants to build a gate to regulate some form of access, I'm sure there may need to be some review in terms of the fire district access, whether there's a Knox box to allow it to open for turnaround machine access for the fire district. But the simple answer to your question is I don't know the exact minute details about the hammerhead, because it is part of the fire district's purview for their regulations for adequate access.
Here's where my discomfort lies. Okay, granted, going back to Commissioner Maggio's comment, this is phase one. We don't normally deal with it. Okay, I'm fine with everything on Los Erebus. And I'm fine in concept with the hammerhead on the property, but this is somebody else's private property, okay? And based on the comments, that somebody else is pretty much against the project. And I'm not sure, I don't want to get to phase 2 until
Commissioner Mason, excuse me, can we save any type of discussion or opinion for after we've heard public comments? So maybe just right now, if we could just focus whatever you're going to say as a direct question to staff.
I would like to see from staff something that would allow the fire department access onto the driveway, because that's necessary for the hammerhead, over that person's objections or any future owner's objections. Because I don't see, without the driveway, we don't have the hammerhead. Without the hammerhead, we don't have a project. And I don't want to get to phase 2 if we don't have a project in that current location. The second thing I would like to see in the updated Soils report is we have a number of oaks adjacent to the house and the residence, and some of the preliminary Soils report is somewhat disingenuous because some of those trees are up against adjacent to retaining walls. One of them is, for example, is a 7-foot retaining wall. So the OSHA, so for 7-foot retaining wall, assuming an 18-inch footing, that's an 8.5-foot vertical cut. The OSHA standard detail is a 4-foot vertical cut and a 1-to-1 layback. So from the back of the retaining wall, if I assume 12 inches for drain rock and waterproofing, 4.5-foot horizontal for the layback, and let's say interior face of stud is face of wall, that's about 6 feet back from the residence before for my cut. It also says it has to be hand dug, and I don't think it's realistic to hand dig 8.5 feet. Plus, even if I did, there'd have to be mechanical compaction in the back. And I don't want to go in there and give somebody the impression that we're saving 5 trees when those 5 trees don't have a chance. So I would like to see that tightened up a little bit. There's nothing in the plans which show retained heights around those trees or how it's going to be laid back or anything to establish that puts the plans somewhat in conflict with the preliminary Soils report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Preston.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about the hammerhead too. And this might be very straightforward. Joshua, the other property owner, where the potential hammerhead would go on, has there been an objection from him or her or they to date to this project?
You're referring to the part, so there's the part that turns up onto the Delamar's property. You're referring to the part that turns down onto the Simon's property?
Yes.
I believe it's the Simon's property. I believe I did have a meeting with 3 of the neighbors, including Mr. Simon, beforehand. He had spoken his objections to the project. At that, I believe his wife, or I'm sorry, I don't want to assume, I believe another resident of that property has submitted public comments for this meeting, also voicing concerns with things I mentioned in my last slide about privacy, visibility, all of that, and the hammerhead. There's some overlap as well for email sent to the assistant fire chief with so
I get that. I apologize, didn't mean to cut you off, just want to keep us rolling here. Setting aside visibility, privacy, etc., I'm talking specifically the right to build a hammerhead on their private property. Has there been an approval from that owner or a rejection of that by the owner or owners?
I'm not
just a hammerhead.
Yeah, just the hammerhead component on their property.
Yes.
I'm not sure if there has been an explicit objection to that specific item or whether it's been part of just their overall objections to the project. I don't know if they are here in tonight's meeting, but
The applicant may have an answer to that too, but I just figured I'd ask. That's the only question that I had. Thanks very much for the report and the presentation.
Is that it, Commissioner? Okay. Thank you. So what I'm hearing so far, Joshua, and kind of just recapping this so the applicant can hear it too, and hopefully address during presentation, is that 3 commissioners have brought up the hammerhead. And then just to clarify for people looking at the staff report, I'm looking at page 3 of the PDF. So is the Simon residence at 4141? Is that the residence that would have the other component of the needed turnaround?
1 second, let me pull up. The applicant did include a context map. Yes, it would go, I believe, right on the top of 4141 Los Erebus's driveway,
Okay, thank you.
at least in the plan set.
Okay, and then before I ask my question, Commissioner Sturm, did you have any questions for staff? No.
Oh, actually, do you know, well, maybe this is for the applicant. If there was some discussion of needing to verify the joint property line that is in the area of the hammerhead. Do you know anything about that?
This is the component that goes upward. That I believe it is still an ongoing, I believe still an ongoing property line dispute concerning that property line right there. Per the applicant submittal, with their survey and the engineering work done, the hammerhead would be completely on their property. But I don't believe there has been a resolution to the current dispute on the property line, and I believe the applicant would be able to elaborate if there's been any updates.
Okay, and then one other question on the turnaround. I was just looking at one of the public comment packets from the neighbor, was it 4146? And they submitted a little, I think, I guess it's a diagram. I don't know if it's what they created, but it has an alternative hammerhead location towards the, missing my orientation, on the other side of the frontage. Do you remember talking with the fire chief about that option? It's page 27 of the staff report.
Yes, I have his public comment open. Let me just quickly see.
And is the fire chief here tonight?
I don't believe. Oh, he is. Assistant Chief Bachman is in the audience tonight, so he would be able to elaborate. The hammerhead alternative that's on slide 27 of the presentation included in that public comment is in green, and that was from a previous. That was from the applicant's examination of the alternatives.
Okay.
And that was before their submittal to us. So they submitted the one they had ended up deciding on. I believe that the applicant though could elaborate, and I'm sure Assistant Chief Bachman could elaborate on whether there's an optimal placement for the hammerhead relative to the proposed residence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask a question, Joshua. So what I remember hearing at the April 18th hearing were concerns from the Planning Commission and from neighbors regarding privacy, the hammerhead and the arborist report, in addition to is the garage considered a story or not. So I do appreciate the presentation and the calculations that were shown to show that the garage is not considered a story by half a foot. plus the other calculation, 43%, where 50 is required. And then I did see in the staff report a couple additional renderings from the driveway. What I'm missing is, why are we seeing this tonight? Like, what has changed? I don't see any changes. I personally am unable to identify any changes in any of the site plans. We still don't have an arborist report. So can you help me understand what changed? Or is it simply that the calculations were provided to show that the garage is not considered a story? And if you're unable to, then I'm going to ask the same question of the applicant. So
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to discuss that. This came to hearing tonight because the applicant provided more information in their attempt to address the public's comments. They provided more renderings to try and show more views of the potential impacts of the residents. On the site plan, they also updated it to include the contour lines as well as the hammerhead, which was not on the site plan as rendered. And then with the preliminary arborist report, I was on the fence, but in my interpretation of it, it had robust information on the existing trees, at least above the ground. The arborist who was preparing it mentioned that in the full report, he said he couldn't deliver the full report because he wanted to do subterranean work. But I figured that with the amount of information that was provided in the preliminary, there would be enough for the commission to review and provide feedback on, especially with the new information. And considering the deficiencies of the previously submitted arborist report, I thought that this information would make this a helpful hearing to provide feedback, especially with what has been provided.
okay, so I appreciate that. So what I heard is that there's more renderings and the preliminary arborist report, but the layout or the siding or the massing of the proposed project has not shifted nor changed.
There was a slight adjustment to accommodate one of the oak trees on site, but other than that, it is largely the same.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for staff before we move to the applicant's presentation? No? Okay, thank you, Joshua. If we can invite the applicant in, please.
I'm promoting Jill McGovern and Donna Chivers.
Welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, welcome. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Donna Chivers, and I am here with Jill McGovern, who is the co-designer, Todd McNeil, I believe, who is online as the arborist, Chris Bachman from the Contra Costa Fire Department, and Todd Delamar, I believe, is also in attendance. So I'm just going to run through what we have changed. I know that there was a question from the Planning Commission on what has changed since the last time. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go here. So we did update the, let's see, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that? Yeah, okay. So we did update the context map to show more accurately the position of the house on the site. I know originally it had, shown it more towards the center. It is more towards the left, closer to the lot line between 4146 Los Erebus. So that has been updated. This also, the square footage changed slightly, as Joshua mentioned. We did pull in the wall on the upper floor to accommodate an oak tree. So the square footage of the house decreased by about 45 square feet. And I also wanted to point out, I know that there was a comment on the accuracy of this table, but this table shows conditioned square footage. It does not include garage square footage for any of the homes. So this is conditioned square footage as per public record, a direct comparison. So it is accurate as far as the size of the proposed home with respect to the existing homes on the street. I also updated the renderings, so wanted to show, get to that point here. We added more renderings, and I also, per the commissioner's comments as last meeting, also added in the retaining walls, proposed some landscaping to soften up the walls, and added in a few more spots of visibility to show what the house could look like from more viewing angles, and what the driveway and retaining walls will look like going forward. So to answer a commissioner's question, the position of the house did not change, but more elements were added to more accurately depict what it will look like from the various viewpoints surrounding it. And then, as the staff report indicates, we also have provided a preliminary arborist report. And in that arborist report, he asked us to accommodate the 30-inch oak tree that was up in the upper right-hand corner, where this wall originally came out to here. We have redesigned the upper floor closet and master bath area to provide about 8'9" from the center of the trunk to accommodate the roots of this 30-inch oak here. So that is also a change, and this is where the 45 square foot reduction comes into place here. We also did update the grade lines, which actually is in conjunction with the discussion of the 3-story rule. And I will have Jill McGovern, who met with Joshua and Nancy, talk through the elevations and how those were adjusted.
What we did mostly was the front stair area. It wasn't shown very graphically, but what we have is a small landscape wall when you connect between the garage doors and the stairway, and from that it's a 2-to-1 slope of landscaping that goes up to the front door. So it's not a vertical wall, it's not part of the structure, it's a gap between the driveway and the entry that is proposed to be a planting area to help soften the appearance of the house, and also allow for the stairs to have a gradual feel as they go up. The stairs will be on grade because we will be backfilling that area to allow for the steps to be on grade. They're not going to be supported on posts and elevated. So that will also bring the landscaping and the visual impact of the house as it steps back to feel more in the grade itself. So you can see it from this side here.
From the north elevation.
Stairs are built at grade for the most part. On the other side, we just more accurately represented the actual slope as it will be. And by doing that is where we all came to an agreement about the story definition. There was, let's see. Oh, there was a comment about that alternative hammerhead site that was initially shown on one of the drawings. And that wasn't a feasible hammerhead because there was no place for the other half of it to be. There's no adjacent driveway. So I just wanted to mention that, since there seemed to be some question as to why we didn't pursue that further. So the only optimal place, the only practical place is at the end where we are, because there are multiple driveways that can be used for access. Donna?
That's all the updates that I have. I know Chris Bachman is here. I'm not sure if the arborist Todd McNeil is here, and I know Todd Delamar had also wanted to speak tonight.
Okay, thank you. So we will just continue it with your presentation. I think there's about 3 minutes left. If anyone else on your team wants to speak, the applicant or anybody.
Donna, do you have the sketch we did today of the headlights?
I do.
There was a comment from someone just in the neighborhood about headlights shining into the Haydenfeld's property. And this is, I mean, it's a real rough sketch, granted, but with the slope of the driveway, our house or the garage is 5 feet above the finished floor of the Haydenfeld's main house. So as we're coming up, lights would shine overhead, and they wouldn't be directly in the house at any point as they're approaching their garage. Once they get to the top, they go in the garage, and that's the end of it.
I would like for Chris Bachman to have an opportunity to speak. Is it better for him to speak now or to address questions later?
It's totally up to you if it's part of your presentation. I think if there's information you're specifically looking for him to share,
Okay.
I would do it now.
Okay.
I would imagine commissioners are going to have some same questions for him that you've already heard.
Okay. Chris, do you want to address some of the different ideas that you've had for the location of the hammerhead? And I can bring up the C1 plan.
Sure. Good evening. And again, I would prefer not to be identified as that we're part of this project. I'm really here to answer questions and provide clarification of what we have required of this project. So I would really prefer to leave their time for their proposal. Okay. And then I can provide clarification to the commissioners and answer the questions that I've been jotting notes down, specifically around the hammerhead. And then same with public comment. If there's any questions or clarification they'd like the fire department to provide, I'd be happy to do that.
Great, that sounds good. So applicant team, you have about 1.5 minutes left. If there's anyone else on your team who'd like to be part of your presentation.
Is Todd McNeil in attendance?
There's a TODD. Is that?
That might be
Todd with 2 Ds?
Probably Todd Delamar.
Oh, that would make sense. We do see you're in if you want to unmute yourself and speak. If you're able to hear us.
Well, yeah, say something.
Yep.
Are we there? Am I here?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I just actually had a question for Chris. I can ask him real quick. Chris Bachman. We sent a letter to or an email to you for Phil Simon's driveway, and I was wondering if we had an opportunity to look at that option for the hammerhead. So I was hoping he can address that when he speaks next.
I can address that now since you're asking me the question as far as your project, and that is no longer an option. I received an email from Philip Simon saying that he is not willing to provide that as an option for his driveway. I should say the bottom of his driveway to be the turnaround where he has his wood placed, understanding that he would have to put some type of permanent easement recording it, and it would restrict the future development around that area on his property. I will address some of the commissioner's concerns about the turnaround and access onto his property and what the easement is. But as far as that proposal that you had, I know you talked to Mr. Simon. He did send me an email on Thursday last week saying he was no longer interested in pursuing that as an option.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. And before before we ask Mr. Bachman to address any other commissioner comments regarding the hammerhead, is there anything else the applicant's team would like to add? So there's about 20 seconds left.
No, I'm good.
No?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Thank you. So then I'll bring it to the commission. If there's any questions of the applicant's team, but if we could maybe first start with Mr. Bachman with any questions regarding the hammerhead, or Mr. Bachman, I heard that you were taking notes. You know, I think it was helpful to hear the letter you received last week from Mr. Simon. Is there anything else just you'd like
Sure.
to
So-
offer before we start?
Yeah, so let's go
Bombardment.
through the questions I heard so far, and I got on about 7:15. The one was concerned about the current design of the hammerhead goes into the neighbor across the street's driveway. What restrictions would that neighbor have? Could they put a gate up? And whether this project is built, whether a hammerhead goes in, anybody that is requesting to put a gate up has the ability to do so, but we do have requirements on the setback of that gate. And it's either 25 or 30 feet. And we require that because usually it's a busier road, but the reason that requirement is there is it allows a vehicle to pull into the drive if a gate isn't open and not have to sit out in the road. Sometimes, or you'll pull, if a visitor's pulling in, usually there's a push or a call button that there's room for a visitor to pull into the driveway, still push a call button or push a button to be allowed to open, or for the homeowner to open the gate. And that way they're not blocking traffic or sitting in the road. So that setback is already required on any property that's requesting to put a gate in. In addition, we do require that gate have a Knox key access. So in an emergency, we can put our key in, open the gate, and it automatically opens. So I think that the concern of, this hammerhead would restrict the property owner from installing a future gate or have restrictions on that property. We do have that restriction in place right now of approximately 25 feet off the road anyway. And when I looked at the design, went back and looked at the shortened design, it did show the total distance at 60 feet from one end of the hammerhead to the other. And that includes the 20 feet of the road. Now it appears that a little more of the hammerhead is going into Mr. Delmar's property. So I'm going to estimate it's probably 20, rather than 20 feet on the one property, 20 feet on the neighbor's property, and 20 feet in the road to obtain that total 60 feet difference. I believe it's probably more like 25 feet onto Mr. Delmar's property, 20 feet in the road, and 15 feet into the neighbor's drive. Even if it was 20, 20, and 20, it still would never restrict that homeowner from putting up a privacy gate or access gate for security purposes or privacy purposes into their property with the hammerhead. Another concern was about the damage to the driveway, to the road, to the hammerhead. Who's going to pay for this? So in order for this to take place, because it is a reduced hammerhead, the property owner is going to need to submit what we call an AMM. That's alternative means and methods application, meaning that they are compliant with an alternate means to still meet the intent of the fire code. We would put that as a stipulation, since we're using an existing road and an existing driveway, that we were not going to require, when the project was built, we felt the road and the driveway were in satisfactory shape, that it could remain existing and the new asphalt or concrete would be done on the new portion of the hammerhead. It's very common that when something like this would be added, though, that we would put it as a condition that the property owner is responsible for maintaining the upkeep and the maintenance of this hammerhead for future years. There was concern of, well, what if the driveway is damaged when we're turning an apparatus around because it wasn't designed to support up to the 37 tons? That would be covered in the agreement that property owner would have to sign with that AMM, saying that in future years, they would have to maintain the entire section of the hammerhead for maintenance. because the only way to assure that in a new project would be that we would require them to tear it all out and pour all new asphalt or concrete in there. We didn't feel that was necessary. We think that can be maintained by it just stipulating as a condition of approval for us issuing a permit, which the property owner and the builder would have to sign. As far as I think that was the majority of the comments. I'd also like to note that I received comments from approximately 7 to 8 neighbors. I did read all their emails. I've listened to their concerns. And another thing I would, that I did talk to Donna Shivers about today was the possibility of, if there's concern of the property line dispute and how close it is to the property line, because we have concerns about that as well. What if in the property line dispute that property line is off by a few feet, and then the hammerhead, the new property or the existing property owner says, I want that removed out of my section, then that property owner, the new property owner building the new house would have to, Mr. Delmar would have to move that hammerhead down. My recommendation was that they could move that hammerhead down about another 10 feet from where it currently is designed. It would still line up straight with the neighbor's driveway at an angle that we would still be able to make that turnaround. And then in the event that a property, it goes to court and Mr. Delmar loses that property line dispute, we're not at risk of going in and tearing out the existing hammerhead and eroding away more of the hillside to correct what was done in an inappropriate location. So out of abundance of precaution, my recommendation was that they could move that down about 10 feet. It would still meet our intent. And then if there was a property dispute, it did go to court and it did not go in Mr. Delmar's favor, there would be no concern about moving or reconstructing that hammerhead and trying to put that piece back. So the other piece I also passed on was that we're willing to accept the hammerhead as our apparatus access for that property, that their driveway, if they're able to show us in a diagram that within 250 feet of that access point, that meets the hose pole requirement to all exterior portions of the home. So then their driveway would not have to, currently the driveway conforms that it can support a fire apparatus, the width, the grade, and everything else. They would not have to do that for the purposes of the fire department, because our access could be accomplished by the hammerhead location is our staging point, as long as it's within 250 feet of the most remote location. If you look on their diagram, they're showing 150 feet from up there in the middle of the drive. That is nowhere near an extra 100 feet from there down to the hammerhead. The only thing they would possibly have to do is provide us with steps or some form of natural walkway that if we park there, that we could get up around the house. So just another option that we're proposing, if it makes this project any easier, maybe makes the driveway can be a little steeper. The driveway doesn't have to be as wide. Maybe not as many trees have to come out, or they could reconfigure it. The driveway would not be part of the fire department requirement. It would just go back supporting the hammer. All of our operations could be supported in that hammerhead turnaround. As far as signage, we would prefer some type of signage just saying no parking, emergency turnaround. Now, again, we could not restrict the neighbor from parking at the end of his driveway, but we have a little more control when it's on as a conditional use for this property to be built, and what the property owner is agreeing to with that AMM, that it would not be, since it is on his property, that it would not be used for overflow parking or parking vehicles overnight. Our whole concern is that if in the middle of the night we're ever forced to evacuate that area, that there's never a car sitting there, that we have the ability to come down to the end of that road, do a quick turnaround and get in position.
Thank you. Commissioner Farsan, I imagine you have a follow-up question.
Thank you, Chair. So Mr. Bachman, maybe I'm just completely missing something, and it's not the first time. So to be very clear here. So if the property owner, not the applicant, the other property owner for which the hammerhead would go onto their property, I believe that's Mr. Simon, who you mentioned earlier, said no, they will not agree to the hammerhead being on their property. Aren't you done with respect to that hammerhead?
I mean, they're saying, I mean, I guess they're saying no, but we would go back and say, well, what's the easement? If there's concern about a turnaround, we're not doing anything to the existing driveway. We're leaving it in place. And if there was ever any damage to that driveway or the hammerhead was not maintained, it would be the responsibility of the applicant who's building the new construction home to maintain that hammerhead in its entirety. So you're talking about, I believe it's 15 feet off the road of Mr. Simon's driveway. Now we'd have to go back and look at, say, what's the, easement of that, and is it within that easement area? I do know that there's no restriction as far as Mr. Simon ever putting up a gate, because we require that 25-foot setback anyway, and that hammerhead is not within that section that would ever restrict him from putting in any type of privacy gate. But that is an option. I don't know if he wants to pursue that and say, he's not going to allow this to exist on his property. Then we would just have to, I would put that responsibility back on the consultant to say, you need to confirm if this is within an easement or right of way that we can identify this as a hammerhead. This was a proposal that was sent to us that we felt was a good solution to try and have as minimal impact on an existing road and take as little of as few trees down as possible and cutting into the soil as least amount. If the entire hammerhead is on his property, you're going to have a lot more retaining walls, more trees come down, and it will be a lot more invasive because, there's a link there in front of his property that, yes, he could go way up into there and then back out, but you're talking about, a lot of soil and a lot of cutting into that bank to make that happen.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. My concern isn't about your suggestion and trying to resolve this. Wholly different issue, and I appreciate the fire department trying to assist in getting this done. But if there is no easement in place or a right of way, that's still private property. And if the private property owner says no, we can't.
Correct.
We can't, and neither can you.
Agree 100%.
That's the big issue. And no one's told me until this is the second meeting. And no one has made the point. Is there an easement? Is there a right of way? And if the answer is no to both of those, it's a private issue between two neighbors.
Correct. And we haven't talked to Mr. Simon about that. I know he was, open to ideas like this in the previously, because he had mentioned about using his entire existing driveway down by his house. And I just cautioned him on that that would have to be recorded. That would have to be a permanent easement that was listed as an emergency turnaround. And then he thought about it and provided me a comment back and said he would like to remove that as an option to use his entire driveway as a turnaround. We'd have to ask him whether he's, for or against that. And if he's against, then again, I would put that responsibility back on the design team and the consultant to provide us the information of, is this proposal possible if the homeowner is against that and there is no easement?
That's very helpful. And again, that's kind of the point that I was trying to get at. And I think we had some of those questions before too, is again, we can only make decisions on public issues. If it's a private land dispute, so I don't mean there's a dispute, but you know what I'm getting at. It's their private property. Again, I'm looking at, I was trying to make sure I was looking at the right letter, but there is a May 12th, 7:28 p.m. from Miss Yano, who is at the property. It's Miss Mr. Simon and Miss Yano, and they say they do not want the hammerhead on their property. So again, that's what they've written. So I just wanted to make sure it was the right property. But with that, I'm good. Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
And before we go to Commissioner Mason, Joshua, we showed a thought to ask you this before the meeting, but while we're talking about the hammerhead and the Simon property at 4141 across the road, do you have any site plans, any images that show both the proposed property, the proposed hammerhead, and then the roadway with the Simon's driveway also?
So like a mock-up of the proposed.
Or yeah, basically like what we're seeing right now on the screen, but also with the other piece across the roadway, just to help facilitate visually during this conversation.
Other than the topographic
Yeah.
drawing with the driveway, I do not.
That's
Okay.
right here.
Yeah, that's probably that's the best one that I'm able to evaluate from. And if you look at where it's showing the existing 16 plus feet, it shows that you'll see where it goes left. It does appear that it's probably 10 to 15 feet into Mr. Simon's driveway. And then the majority of that hammerhead of that 60 foot is what I was referring to, that it's probably 20 to 25 feet is going up into his property off where, if you look at the existing line where the road is.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Mason?
Thank you. One specific question and one more general question. If I remember correctly, there's also a vertical clearance requirement. Does that apply to the whole road and to the entire hammerhead? Or because if the hammerhead is extending onto Mr. Simon's property, is he going to have to do some trimming there to maintain it? Or and I don't remember what the vertical clearance requirement is.
13 feet 6 inches.
Okay.
Yes, and that vertical clearance would need to be maintained both on the road and any portion of that hammerhead that would extend into his driveway.
Okay, thank you.
Or what's called out as, I believe it's 16 feet. No, I'm sorry, 12 feet, 12 feet wide.
Thank you. Next question. This is more of a general question, not specifically related to this. Came up at the county level that Lafayette is considering or looking to acquire a ladder truck. At what point, the ladder truck, all the requirements are different. You know, we also have wheel loading, stuff like that. At what point do we need to consider the requirements for a ladder truck instead of just your normal H20 loading, which you're rolling out? Because obviously this wouldn't fit a ladder truck.
So when we say the requirement to support any of our fire apparatus access roads, we do list that at 37 tons, and the 37 tons does support our aerial apparatus. In the event of bringing an aerial down into any one of these homes, a ladder truck would respond. It's just going to respond from, it's going to be our nearest ladder truck. We don't have one in Lafayette, but it's going to come from Walnut Creek. So that ladder truck's going to pull up on scene, not to put the aerial in place, but more so the tools, the ground ladders that are on the ladder truck, and the assignment that typically our firefighters that are on a ladder will do, which is usually search and rescue or ventilation on a roof. So they would put they would take their ground ladders off our aerial truck, take them up to the house, ladder the roof, get on the roof, and then if they had to cut a ventilation hole, they would do that. So ladder trucks today are still going to respond into this neighborhood. They're just going to be forced to back out, but their use isn't to get them in place and put that aerial up, as it is for the tools and the personnel off that ladder truck for the tactical assignment that they're going to be given.
Okay, here's my specific question. I think you answered it, but I just want to ask it specifically. So for a ladder truck, the biggest concern is the outriggers, which extend out and also have a very high concentrated point load. compared to your standard H20 loading. So from what you said, it is not, you don't foresee having to use, if you're just using it to bring the equipment in, you wouldn't be extending out the outriggers. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, to say we never put it out on a residential home is not true. We do, but the more common use in a residential home is it's there for the equipment on it, the ground ladders on it, and the personnel. When we continue to push and identify that we would like to have a ladder truck in Lafayette, it's really for all of our commercial development and our multifamily homes that we continue to have going up throughout Lafayette. So we have that closer placement to be able to get a ladder truck in, put it up, and where it's a more likely scenario where rescues could have to occur on multiple story buildings, that we have a ladder truck that's closer to respond rather than responding from Walnut Creek. But that's why you continue to hear us identify that our long-term goal is to get a ladder truck in Lafayette because of the amount of building and commercial development that's going on.
Thank you. And then just for my own mind, I get fire trucks. We see them drive around all the time. Out to out, what is the dimension for the outriggers for the ladder truck if they're to be deployed?
So the truck takes up approximately, just call it 10 feet when you're taking the mirrors. And then the each of the outriggers go out approximately another 4 feet. That's why our aerial access requirement increases from 20 feet up to 28 feet. So it's to account for the outriggers that when they're out, we can still get another apparatus by them. So approximately 4 feet on each side.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Before we move to other questions for the applicant, are there any questions, any other questions from commissioners specifically for Mr. Bachman? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. I'll open it to commissioners. Are there other questions for the applicant team based on tonight's presentation before public comment? I have a couple, but I'll save them for till everyone else is gone. Commissioner Mason.
Thank you. I think you probably heard my general comments about the trees adjacent to retaining walls. You specifically raised the issue of the revision to pull the house away from the 30-inch oak tree. Is there a retaining wall at that exterior wall adjacent to it? If so, how high is that retaining wall?
We are answering now.
Yes, please.
So yeah. So if we look at the C1, we have not actually had ISAT revise this report, but the top of the wall here is at 147. We pulled it back to approximately the 144 line. So that would reduce the height of the retaining wall by approximately 2.5 to 3 feet. So if the original was 7, we're looking at probably between 5 and 6 feet on the height of that retaining wall.
Okay, so this is more than a question for the arborist. So it was, as I got it, 8'9" to the center of the oak, which puts, say, 7 foot 6 inches to the edge of the oak. A 6 foot retaining wall means you're going to have to cut back behind the wall, say about 2-3 feet. Means that the cut is going to be within, say, 3 to 4 feet of the 30-inch oak. I'm not sure you can cut that much, well, let me actually, probably within 2 feet of the edge of the oak. I'm not sure that oak would survive that, or could you address that a little bit more specifically?
So this is
Donna?
the reason. Yep.
if you, again, this drawing hasn't been revised, but the new house footprint, do you see the 145 contour line?
Yes.
We're going to be down lower. We're going to be at about 143.5. Then we'll parallel the back line over to that short retaining wall that's perpendicular. So at 143.5, we're below the upper floor finish level at that corner. Then at the inside corner, we'll probably get up to 145. So the cut's a lot smaller than it was. So at 145, we probably have a 3-foot cut at about 8'9" diameter. Is that where we are, Donna?
Yeah.
Off the tree. And that's not to the inside corner. We're going to be closer to 10 feet at our lowest point. And this isn't a good place to look at that. If we can go to the floor plan, we can see how far away it's going to be actually.
Yeah. So we're talking about this retaining wall right in through here. It's going to be much farther away.
What about the retaining wall up? Well, I mean, this is just, I picked a specific location, but the same general comment occurs elsewhere, which is everything is relative to off the edge of the house, but I'm not sure that is, I would like to see that addressed in the final final arborist report, because the cuts to maintain your retaining walls will extend outside the footprint of the house. And I don't have a really good feel for the retaining conditions all around the exterior of the house. And I listed earlier, and you can look it up, the standard OSHA approved layback designs. And I would like to make certain, I'd like to see that addressed in the arborist report as far as, you know, how that fits with the requirements of the tree, because obviously it's going to extend well into the canopy, and you're not going to be able to avoid root damage with, you know, any substantial cut. And so I will leave that to the arborist to respond, or at least address in his final report. But I would like to see that, because I want to make certain that trees that we say we're going to save, we can save, and we're not accidentally killing off trees that we promised everybody that could be saved, but need to be removed because of construction tolerances.
Understood.
Thank you.
Can we go back one question to the hammerhead and the right-of-way, or the?
Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to keep moving forward for a second. So Commissioner Mason, my comment was going to be very similar, or my question. When I look at the revised site plans that we received, figure A 1.0, which is page 4 of 17, it looks, so this one, it looks like this is the revised design. The tree, I guess it's the west portion is still within the drip line. And so I think just one thing that is very helpful for the commission, and we've expressed this on other packages, it's hard for us to know which figures have been updated and which haven't. So strong suggestion when it comes back, please, whatever is here tonight, leave it in black. Whatever has changed, make it red, or make the old design red and the new one black. It's very difficult for us, and it's not advantageous for you if we're spending our time trying to figure out what your project is. And I think the point has been made, again, back to the arborist report, that if we can see what is being proposed very clearly, it'll help us be able to help make a best project for you to move forward. Are there any other questions specifically for the applicant that you would like clarified as a commissioner before we open this up for public comment? Okay. With that, Joshua and Nancy, I'll turn it back to you. Do we have any hands raised for public comment on this item?
If anyone would like to speak on this project, please raise your hand. See Julie Haydenfeld.
Welcome, Julie. Can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate so much the job that you have now that I've done this some. As I just wanted to, I'm Julie Heidenfeld. I live at 4146 Los Erebus. When we spoke last, it seemed that some of the commissioners felt that the neighbors didn't feel that the property owner had the right to develop his property, and we've become accustomed to a vacant parcel to the extent that any development would be objectionable. We want to say that is not accurate, and we do feel that the applicant has the right to develop his property. We do feel that there is a need to just look at reasonable and other ways of accepting this property and doing it in a different way. We feel that a lot of the information has not been accurate, and we do feel that the owner does have the right to develop his property. We have a volume of concerns about the applicant's plans, and we want to send a strong signal that we feel the siting and massing detract from this neighborhood. Yet, like we said, exists irrational and reasonable solutions. We just feel like the applicant thus far has been unable or refused to accept any of these or any ideas that we have brought forward. So we would like the commission to look at other ways of potentially moving the site and the massing of the property. The commission has the right to factual and thorough information, and we don't feel that the 3D renderings have been factual. And with what is actually, seen, especially the updated ones, are still not factual of what is actually seen from the road, from our property, et cetera. The absence of the topographical maps thus far and the accurate tree inventory with the proposed house siting to scale in order for the commission to factually evaluate the applicant's claims of additional tree removal and slope introduction by centering the house on the lot. No one's objecting to the square footage of the house, no issues with the FAR ratios. Rather, the crux of the concerns are the two issues the commission's evaluating: siting and massing. So the number one, unreasonable elimination of privacy to 4146 Los Erebus. The site selection topography orients the house to face northeast towards 4146 from the backside rather than due north, consistent with 4146 and 4148. 150-foot plus driveway running parallel to Los Erebus. The last 100 feet of the driveway heads directly towards 4146 home and side yard, creating light pollution for our living room, kitchen, dining room, bedrooms, etc. Of the 31 trees that we see on the maps, they exist on the applicant's property, 20 will require removal, and that will change all of the renderings of everything we're seeing. Everything will change. And 16 of these are the protected species, nearly 30 diameter feet of oaks to be removed. Of the 13 trees that border Los Erebus Drive, all will be removed except for 2. Current siting plans cause the driveway length, and driveway length causes the excessive tree removal. The drainage is a major issue of this property, over 6,700 feet of added impervious surface area. The drainage plan includes an energy dissipator along the eastern side of the property, where we border, down a steep slope towards our property. There is currently a drainage inland that exists. We have maintained that, even though it is not on our property. It does flood every year. It floods into our property and down the driveway in 4141, and we have to continuously maintain that. Redirecting additional waters towards this steep hillside, we feel is irresponsible. In
Ms.
October,
Haydenfeld, excuse me, if you can please wrap it up because it's at 3 minutes.
okay. I just wanted to say, I'm asking the commissioners to please look at this slopage. We feel the house could be resited and centered on the property, giving more privacy to our home. Less trees will be removed by shortening the driveway, avoid unreasonable reductions in privacy, avoid further aggravating a pre-existing drainage issue. And the map contours orient the home to face due north, consistent with 4.6 and 4.1.4.8. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you. And I will ask staff, maybe we can stop the screen share because I believe this is the applicant's presentation that's pulled up. Okay, thank you, Ms. Haydenfeld.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other speakers?
If there's anyone else from the public that would like to speak, please use the raise hand function. Susan Goldie is being invited into as a panelist.
Welcome, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm not, oh, there I am.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for your continued efforts to really thoughtfully think about our neighborhood. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of things have already been said that I do express the same concerns, but one of the things for me is that I didn't speak up at all before the development of the property at 4146. And I feel like that dramatically already changed the nature of our neighborhood. And so I feel like this is like another change that's even more dramatic in terms of the visual feel of our nature preserve in Lafayette. And so I completely support Todd in the development of his property. I want another neighbor that's like a great addition to our street. It's not that I'm saying let's not develop the property. I just feel that when all is said and done, visually, it's really going to be a series of retaining walls going up and up and up, and that it sets a precedent for these tall looking, the house itself, I understand, is not over the height requirements. I get that. But I feel that when I see the story poles on site and I drive by and I contemplate how it's going to look, that doesn't communicate to me through the plans. I'm not an architect, but when I see the poles and I think about all the walls that will go up, I do feel that it dramatically changes the feel of our neighborhood, particularly the length of the driveway, and just like standing in the street, it feels quite massive. So I just would hope that some of the suggestions that have been made could be incorporated in a beautiful way, that you guys have designers and architects on, thinking this through. The hammerhead itself is going to look very commercial. I'm for safety. I have shoes underneath my bed in case I need to evacuate one night. I try to keep my car full of gas. I'm concerned about fire safety as well. But I do feel like this will make the end of our road look very commercial, like thinking through the signs. And I hadn't even thought about signage before tonight, but I guess I'm just asking if consideration could be made to the aesthetics so that it really does honor the nature of Lafayette and this rural environment that we all love. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, if you're comfortable, I do have on the site plans, page 3 includes like kind of a contextual image with addresses. Do you mind sharing your address?
Oh, yes, no problem. So I'm at 4148. So I am the neighbor adjacent to the Heidenfelds. And I guess one of the things that is just sort of daily living, as Julie did mention, is when we have rain, and we're all praying for even more rain, but when we do have those heavier rains, it is an issue for all of us, particularly those of us at the end of the street. The amount of water that's been coming, particularly the last couple of years, is just nothing like I've seen over the 22 years that I've lived here. So I know that drainage plan is not really part of this initial analysis, but I do think that very careful consideration will have to be made to that, particularly where this proposed half of the hammerhead is going to go, because that culvert there and all the sways that come down the hill amongst our 3-4 properties are critical.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for the speaker, Commissioner Sturm?
I wanted to ask, I'm looking at the context map that was in the applicant's, or is in the applicant's drawing set, and I made a note of, they put the dimensions, the separating distance between your house and 4146, and it's what, about 5 feet greater than the distance that's measured between the proposed house and 4146. I was wondering, what do you, what kind of screening, or how did you guys mitigate any privacy issues between you?
Between our homes?
Mhm.
Well, one thing that's optimal, I guess, is that the way the windows between our homes are situated is that none of our main living areas are kind of adjacent to one another. At the end of our driveway, which is adjacent to the Heidenfeld's driveway as well, we do have very tall vegetation. But I will tell you, I've never told Julie this, but there is one window of their home that looks right into where our outdoor shower for our pool is. So it's not a big deal at all. But when I thought about what's being proposed here, it did occur to me that, wow, that's an even more dramatic view upon another property. Like if I think about the cars coming in and look, at least as it's being described to me, the cars coming into the new property, looking straight into their main living areas, it does seem invasive, as well as particularly the only area of their property where their outdoor enjoyment space is going to be directly under view of the new home. So if the home could be moved more centrally on the land, I think that would definitely be preferable.
Commissioner Sturm, does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have Dan Heidenfeld joining.
Hey, thanks very much for your time. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hey, thank you. And again, I want to also reiterate what Julie said. We appreciate the service of the commissioners. Thank you. It's unpaid, and what you guys do is very much appreciated. I want to point out, back on the 18th of April, Commissioner Maggio, you mentioned something really important. That is, you would like to see a fire evacuation solution in place that benefited all neighbors, rather than a kind of a forced march of a hammerhead. And that's how I think a lot of the neighbors feel. This is a forced situation that no one wants. And we would like to see some other type of solution that benefits the entire neighborhood, as opposed to one that detracts from property values and property rights. But the other point I wanted to mention, a couple points. The applicant volunteered information to the commission relating to a property line dispute. And while such disputes shouldn't generally have much relevance to a siting and massing decisions of the commission, the applicant stated that this dispute make it seem like the proposed siting is closer than it is. So I wanted to take some time, Commissioner Radnich, if I could, to just address that issue, since I did not have the time, nor did I volunteer this information back on the 18th. Would that be okay?
Yes, you're welcome to share whatever you want in your 3 or so minutes. So please go ahead.
Okay. Well, a couple minutes on this. We respect lot lines and property rights, and we live in a neighborhood with lots defined back in 1940, frequently missing monuments, last installed in the 60s, and errors are not uncommon, but we typically resolve these issues in good faith with neighbors. And we purchased our property in 2016 adjacent to this vacant lot. Pre-existing driveway, along with a rock retaining wall that runs the entire length of a access and utility easement. and mulch landscaping was pre-existed down to our utility box down at Los Erebus. The alleged encroachment averages approximately 24 to 28 inches along about 40-foot section of deer fence. The total enclosed area of alleged encroachment is about 120 square feet. It's a narrow pie-shaped slice. In other words, an average of 24-inch lot dispute makes little difference when in this situation with a significant privacy elimination issue at hand. Now, if the deer fence was extended, if the property line was extended along the deer fence down along to Los Erebus, the total area of suggested encroachment would be about 540 square feet. My point I'm trying to make is we're dealing with less than 2 feet of deer fence. So it is not a material issue in relating to this privacy elimination that we're facing. We have received multiple demand letters from the applicant's attorney, along with emails threatening damages and bringing forth a lawsuit. As of last Wednesday, the 11th, we have responded to the applicant attorney's offer to compromise by entering into good faith negotiations on the acquisition of such property at fair market value. Yet we have not received a response. Now, we hope to resolve this dispute despite, absent any legal action. But now that the commission is aware that there is a risk of the applicant filing a suit, there may be subsequent litigation that might further complicate or delay the applicant's plans. In summary, the property line dispute is just not significant enough to be relevant relating to the siting, massing, and privacy elimination. And we remain hopeful of a constructive resolution. But the issue at hand here really is around siting and massing. And one of the points I'd also like to make is in the revised arborist report, we're dealing with 31 trees on a property. 20 are going to be eliminated. The primary reason for 20 being eliminated is length of driveway. Length of driveway is driven by siting. We would ask respectfully that the commission really examine the siting of this and begin to question, when you take a look at the topographical map, if we resited it, moving it to the center of the property, following the contours, it solves many issues. The contours will face the house north. We shorten the driveway, we protect trees. And Commissioner Mason, I appreciate your comments in regards to saving 130-inch oak. We're talking about 20 trees, 16 being protected, driven by the siting decisions of which you have the obviously responsibility for evaluating. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? No, seeing none from the commission. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haydenfeld. Are there any other public comments for tonight?
I'm not seeing any more raised hands.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Delamar, so your hand is up. Hi. So at this point, the applicant's team does have 5 minutes to address any public comment you heard tonight, to present anything additional that you might have missed in the first portion of your presentation. So I'll turn it back over to the applicant's team.
I just want to say a couple things. The 2 feet or the 20 inches that Dan's talking about is not that small. It's 6 feet of fencing that's coming across in a certain area. It's very easy to see too. If you look at some of the pictures, you've got orange stakes that mark out the hammerhead, and it's not, 2 feet or whatever he's talking about. The other thing I'd like to point out is this guy's making me out to look like the bad guy of the block. Okay. I've asked that guy for 2 years.
Hey, Mr. Todd, or Mr. Delamar, excuse me.
Yep.
So what I will not listen to is a back and forth. This is an opportunity for your team to provide any information that would help us make a decision on your project. We are not interested in a private dispute that is going on. So if there's anything constructive you would like to add, please do. Please hold everything else.
my family and I, we really want to move to Lafayette. We love the community, and I have family there that they live in Moraga. My brother lives there. And I just want to make it a point that, it means a lot to our family. The architects have done a great job in designing this house, and we think we think they followed all the guidelines. I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary with this house. It's a beautiful house, and that's all I want to say. And I'll back down right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There is still 3 minutes of the applicant's chance for rebuttal if you guys would like to use the time. Otherwise, I see Mrs. Shivers, you're shaking, you're nodding your head yes, so please go ahead.
May I share my screen again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I wanted to address Commissioner Farshad's question regarding whether or not there was a right-of-way easement that allowed the hammerhead, the other half of the hammerhead, to be completed on the other side of the street. So I just wanted to point out that on the C1 plan, grading and drainage, these thick black dotted lines represent the right-of-way easement on Los Erebus, and you can see that the other half of the hammerhead is completely within that right-of-way easement. So I just wanted to address that question. We also wanted to come back, Jill, I will put up the regarding the light pollution and what we've done to address privacy. Again, is to eliminate windows along, let's see, this side. So this window here is now very high. Nobody can look out of it. You see sky, you see trees. We are not looking into anybody's bedroom.
Donna, we're not seeing the right screen.
I'm sorry.
Now we have the right screen.
Now you have the right screen. I think you're a little late. And we have also eliminated the window in the garage. And then Jill, I'll let you speak to the light coming up the driveway. That was also a concern that was brought forth.
One of the comments we saw from a neighbor was saying that if you're at elevation 108 with your headlights, you're going to be just shining them directly into the house as you're approaching the garage. And that's just not physically possible. As you can see from this, you're pointing up and over. Granted, once you get to the flat part of the driveway and you're turning in, there will be that short period of time. But they do have the Haydenfelds have a big porch that goes around the perimeter. So it's not like we would have our headlights shining into their windows for any length of time other than just in passing as you turn. So I think the driveway itself blocks the majority of the light. And again, as Donna said, from privacy, we've removed any windows that are spaces that the Delamars would be in, where they're high windows. They're for light only. The main windows we have face the street, and that was done specifically for privacy. And we took the rest of them, just make them light access.
I also want to point out that on the renderings that we have shown, all of these renderings are very accurate based on the information that we have off of the survey and off of the C1 plan. And I also want to point out that none of them show any trees in the front of the property. So we are not providing any tree screening. We want to show accurately, yes, we are looking at removing trees to put this driveway in, and we are not showing those trees as obstructing any views from the driveway. We will, so they are as accurate as possible based on the information that we've been provided. Jill, did you have anything else to add?
Well, I was going to say, Dawn and I have discussed repeatedly moving the house further to the right, or bringing it closer down. The closer we get to the street, the steeper the topography gets, and moving it to the north it hampers other trees. So I think we're in the best location possible. And we're working closely with the arborist to do what we can do to save as many trees as possible. And in any event, the only way we can get up to the area where the garage is with a driveway of a certain length. Otherwise, we can't meet the slopes. And if we, try to come in on the Hammerhead side, it's just too steep. So we were trying to accommodate all the requirements that were needed to meet the fire access. So we're still in discussions with that. But I don't see how moving it further to the north is really beneficial in any way.
Thank you. I know we are just slightly over the 5 minutes. So Mr. Delamar, I see your hand is up. Was that from before, or was that something to add to the end of your team's rebuttal? Oh, it's down. Okay. Okay, well, thank you to the entire applicant team. If we can please stop the screen share, and we'll bring it to the commission for discussion. Commissioner Mason?
Yes, I actually had a question following up there, the last presentation.
Sure,
the comments, they made the comments that the 3D renderings were as accurate as possible. I know a lot of us are visual people. There were comments about the story poles, and before they come back next time, I was wondering if they could verify the accuracy of the story poles as far as location and height, so that when people are driving by there, they're not seeing something that isn't there, and that the house, the residence, isn't larger or higher than the drawing show. Thank you.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're asking that when we see this item again, just if the applicant's team can double check that the story poles on site reflect what they're proposing next time.
That's correct, because one of the comments, the public comments, was the elevations do not appear to match the story poles. If they are saying that the elevations and the 3D renderings are as accurate as possible, then the story poles may be off. And since a lot of us just drive by there and look at it and use that as our guideline and judgment, it would help if they could verify the accuracy of the story poles.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Maggio?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a question for the design team. I know when Mr. Bachman was talking about the Hammerhead, he made a comment about the possibility of reducing the impervious surface on the driveway if they were able to rely on access to the property via the Hammerhead solely. I'm wondering if that is a possibility, if the design team thinks that's a possibility to reduce some of that impervious surface, because there is as much impervious surface as there is footprint on the house, over 3,000 square feet. And since we have drainage concerns in that area, it would really be nice to reduce some of that if it's possible. What does the design team think about that?
So before, is that a rhetorical, or are you asking for the feedback tonight? Because Joshua, I'd like to ask you so we're all clear on what our charge is tonight. It sounds like we're recommending that this item be continued. We're asking for the finalized arborist report to come back. We are expressing comments such as Commissioner Maggio's about the pervious surface area and the driveway configuration. We've heard other items regarding the story poles and some public comments on privacy, drainage. Is it simply enough that we continue having discussion, Joshua, and then kind of recap those bullets of topics? Or are you looking more, so for example, Commissioner Maggio, her specific question, in my mind, we don't necessarily need the applicant to chime in. It's something that I'm hoping the applicant is hearing, that we would like to see the change. But Joshua, what would be helpful for you for tonight?
The main gist of the recommendation was to provide feedback to the applicants. So if there are things that the commission wants to see revised or addressed, that they can address that for the next hearing. If there are clarifying, if there are components that need to be clarified, I think it would be beneficial for the applicant to respond, but per the recommendation, the main gist is, and the main objective would be to provide feedback to the applicant on the phase 1 aspects.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Maggio, anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I have comments, no more questions, but comments, but I can wait until the commissioners are delivering their comments.
We are now, please.
Okay,
all
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, following up with what staff is requesting, I think we really need a more realistic plan for the trees. I agree with other commissioners that currently the cuts are well within the drip line of the trees, and many of these heritage oaks really don't have a chance for survival. So based on the plans that we've seen in our packet. So what we need are to be sure that the current plans reflect realistic outcomes for the trees. And then we really have to resolve this whole hammerhead thing, whether it needs to be clear, although I just heard the applicant state that there is the required setbacks for the hammerhead. I think we need to be strong and clear that we have everything we need for the hammerhead to go forward. Let's see. Yeah, and a reduction, if possible, of the impervious surface, because there is so much, and drainage is going to be, a drainage plan is going to be really important once we get into phase 2. But, you know, our charge really is siting and massing. And I think, as the chair mentioned at the beginning of this application, we really don't know a lot more than we did the last time this came around. There's still a lot of unknowns. And I think a lot of this needs to get resolved before it does come back to the commission, so that we can concentrate on the siting and the massing and not be preoccupied with all of these other issues. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Sturm?
Thank you, Chair. I second the request that moving the hammerhead to the, I'm sure, like if you're looking at the house from the street, to the more to the right,
North.
North, okay, per Assistant Chief Bachman's suggestion. I mean, just from a very simple observant standpoint, there's a lot going on at the end of the road there, and I just think adding another, I mean, I understand the alignment with the driveway across the street, but if you can sort of give those other driveways right at the end some space and still have enough alignment that it's workable, and, you know, not to mention the easements, I think that's preferable. In terms of just the lot line, for me, just for the applicant and the neighbor, for me, just knowing that there was some looking at exactly where the lot line was helpful, because when I was out there looking at the story poles and then at the plans, it wasn't really making sense. So I mean, that's not factoring into I don't think it's a huge issue. It was just more of a point of reference. But that said, I do think that moving the house even a few feet further away from 4146 would be helpful to them. I actually think it would make a pretty big difference. I just want to say that, we're in the Hillside Overlay District or any hilly areas in town, we do often deal with this issue of privacy, and it's exacerbated by differences in elevation. And while views into someone's outdoor living space or someone's interior living space through windows is it's the main thing that I think we're looking for when we're assessing privacy issues. To me, it's not the only thing. Like, we also often look at whether an adjacent structure is going to be, oh, Commissioner Mason, you're not muted. We do look at whether an adjacent residence is going to feel like it's towering over another residence, or in this case, I brought this up last time, it does feel, even if the windows are high and they're not aligning, and it does feel like the residence is turned toward the neighbor. And to me, that's somewhat of a privacy issue as well. So I know last time, I think I was, I'll acknowledge that the house is, they're meeting the side setback as required in the zoning district and more. So that's great. So, but I do think it's because of the way the adjacent neighbors oriented and the house being closer to that side and oriented toward the neighbor. I think it does, I can understand how it would create some discomfort for that neighbor, just the way the houses are sort of communicate with each other. And I would love to see the house shifted even a little bit to the right. And last time I think I had those thoughts and possibly made that comment, and I listened to the designer's explanations of working with the grade, and I thought, oh, okay. But I'm looking at it today, I'm looking at reading through the neighbors' public comment. I still I maintain that I'd like to see the house shifted, and then having the assistant fire chief's comment about potentially being able to shorten the driveway and not necessarily having to meet specific maximum slopes, sort of piggyback on my wanting to see the house shifted. Those two things would work together. And to be honest, I'm not, the more trees we can save, the better. I haven't been tracking specific trees and how little adjustments will affect them, but if shortening the driveway does, and shifting the house, save some trees, that would be great. That's all I had. In terms of the rest of the massing, I like how it steps. I think it is hard to see a new house up on the hill. And I think that, like, in terms of the design, I think that's all working out. And I appreciate all of the work that went into clarifying the story issue. So for me, the two remaining things are the length of driveway and the privacy issue that's created by the house being sited where it is.
Okay, thank you. We'll go Commissioner Mason and then Commissioner Farson.
Thank you. I second what Commissioners Maggio and Sturm said, so I won't need to repeat that. Drainage usually isn't a siding and massing issue, but we typically don't have this much hardscape on a project, so I would like to see it addressed. Specifically, there's a lot of discussion about pervious versus impervious surfaces, and in this project, it's a little bit disingenuous because the hardscape, whether it's pervious or impervious, generally has a downhill retaining wall supporting it, such as on the driveway. So even if the water is to go would go through the pervious slavers. It would be picked up by the drainage, the drain line behind the retaining wall, and would have to be hard piped out to an inlet or someplace like that. So I would like to see the drainage more fully developed when it comes back to, because to me, for this project, it's part and parcel with the siding and massing is addressing all the drainage which comes off the house. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mason. Commissioner Farson.
Thank you, Chair. I won't say I agree with a lot of what's said. I'll just repeat some main points for me. One, if the applicant can move some of the siding to alleviate some of the privacy concerns for 41, 46, that's great. I can't say I won't approve it as it is, but I think they can better it and hopefully get more people on board in the neighborhood just as a step forward. I think the lot line issue has no bearing whatsoever for me on that. That's a private issue that needs to be dealt with if necessary. I don't think it affects my decision-making in terms of siding and massing. One thing that does affect my decision-making is we need the definitive answer to the easement on the hammerhead. If it's going to remain where it is, instead of moving it north, which I actually agree with, that everybody has brought up and Assistant Chief Bachman also brought up. But if it's going to stay where it is, somebody needs to tell me definitively that is the right of way and what kind of right of way it is, because there are different right of ways that are allowed. So that's an answer either from Joshua and staff or the applicant, definitive answer to that question. Let's see. That everybody else got that. Those are just, I just wanted to reiterate some of my main points, what was said before. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to say, I echo my fellow commissioners. The hammerhead needs to be sorted out. If the applicant's team can revisit the length of the driveway based off of what we heard tonight from Mr. Bachman regarding the fact that in theory, the hammerhead, there could be enough length to the backside of the house. If the applicant's team can look at shifting the siding to create more privacy between 41, 46 and the proposed project. And if we can preserve as many trees as possible and also make sure that the trees that are being proposed to be retained at this point can feasibly, if it can actually feasibly happen once you account for retaining walls and construction as well. So Joshua, hearing those comments that we've made, I feel the commissioners are pretty consistent with the handful of comments. Is there anything additional that would be helpful that you're looking for, or do we make a recommendation? I guess we have to actually make a motion to bring this back. And it says continue the item to a date certain to allow the applicant to respond. Is there a date that the planning staff is thinking, or will you be following up with the applicant's team after this meeting?
Excuse me, just quickly looking ahead on some meetings. So the next meeting, there are 2, possibly 3 items on it. There are some more substantial comments, so I believe it might be most prudent to continue it to June 20th, which is 2 meetings from now, just to allow enough time for to address all of the comments. So I would consider June 20th, and I'll also leave it open as well to the applicant for their preference and in terms of gauging the work that needs to be done to address the comments from the commissioners.
Okay. And then you're looking for a motion tonight to bring it back based on tonight's comments, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any commissioners ready to make a motion? Commissioner Maggio.
Okay, I move that we continue this application to June 20th, allowing the team to respond to the comments from the commission this evening.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Maggio, a second by Commissioner Farsan, and we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Farsan,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
and I'm Chair Radnich. Aye. And I don't think we need to say this, but there are 2 planning commissioners absent tonight. So that's 5-0, 2 absent. Okay, thank you. And thanks to the applicants team and thanks to staff and Mr. Bachman for tonight for this item. It is 9:06. Before we move to item 7, which is the capital improvement program update for 2022 and 2023. Joshua, I would like to maybe suggest that we take a 5-minute break and then come back, or is this, how do you feel about a 5-minute break? Or is this a short item?
Because I'm not running the meeting. But I'll defer to Nancy. I believe Mike Moran, who is running the next item, is in attendance. So I'll leave it to Nancy as the.
It's actually up to the commission.
Okay.
Okay, well, typically we follow the practice, the city council take a break every 2 hours. So if we could just take a 5-minute break, it's 9:07. So I guess 9:12-ish, if people can come back, and we'll just break until then. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you for your time, commissioners.
Welcome, Mr. Moran.
Thank you.
So
See you right on time at 9:12.
yeah, perfect. So I just want to make sure planning staff is on the other side there.
I am.
Okay, perfect. So we'll bring the meeting back. It's 9:12, and on our agenda, we'll move to item 7A, new public hearings. Again, this is for the 2022-2023 Capital Improvement Program update and proposed projects recommendations. So tonight we have Mr. Mike Moran on to provide us with an update. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Yes, the primary reason I'm here this evening is to have the Planning Commission find next year's capital projects to be in compliance with Lafayette's general plan. But I also do like to take this annual opportunity, if you will, to just update you on projects that have been completed, ongoing projects, in addition to future projects, in case you have any specific input or comments on those projects. So just for completed and ongoing, I'll just do a brief summary and then I'll share the screen for the proposed future projects. We did do a surface seal project this last year, 2021, that included about 18 streets, and those are just maintenance of the streets. They're not repaving, they're surface seals, cape seals, and base repairs, crack fill, and just basically maintenance activities that will extend the life of your existing streets and give us the best life for the money. We also did finish a pretty large repaving project, which included Moraga Road from the Moraga border down to Rimrock, so halfway down the hill, well, 2/3 down the hill. And if you were familiar with the condition of that road the previous year or two, it was in pretty rough shape. So I'm glad we got to take care of that. Also a large section of Reilly's Valley Road from Pleasant Hill Road to Rossi, and that also included an extensive amount of pathway widening and reconstruction, and we're really glad about that because that is a feeder pathway to Spring Hill Elementary and even Akalani's High School, and those are now, that pathway is now wider, it's now ADA compliant with better ramps, and the cross slopes are better, and it's just a much improved project. So those are the main paving projects, if you will. We also had the opportunity to help update and renovate the restrooms out at the community center. And if any of the commissioners had an opportunity to use those restrooms in the last 30 years, you know they were about 40 years overdue for renovation. So I'm really glad we took care of that. And then finally, the Brook Street Park has recently been completed, and I'm glad we finally opened that. I will add that everything is taking longer than we all want. Supplies are taking longer, contractors are less available, designs are taking longer to complete. It's just the mode we're operating in. And because of that, we have several overlap projects that I'll mention now. We have one project that we opened bids on already. It's another surface seal project, but this is the largest one we've ever done. It's going to basically treat a lot of our residential streets, over 40 residential streets. It is a joint project. There are some streets that we've combined with Moraga, and then a few streets with Contra Costa County to just kind of team up and get a scale of economy and an efficiency on that contract. That's ongoing. We opened bids maybe a month ago, and that's ongoing. We have a children's deck at the Lafayette Library and Learning Center project that I probably mentioned last year, but we did have to rebid it. It is out for bid again now, and that's going to basically make the children's deck, which is a high-level deck, it's like 3 stories up, it's going to make that more enclosed, but still provide an indoor-outdoor feel with like a louvered roof and like a clear enclosure that parents will feel is safer for their kids to be out there, because one of the concerns with that deck is that kids would just go up and over the railing on that existing deck. So looking forward to doing that one. We have a traffic signal at Mount Diablo Court and Mount Diablo Boulevard, which we just opened bids for. That's been kind of in the works for several years. and stemmed out of a development project that you probably are familiar with at the end of Mount Diablo Court from several years ago. We finally have that out to bid, an open bid. We plan to award that in June. And then finally, there's a rain garden at the corner of First Street and Golden Gate Way, which will have some bioretention and some native landscaping, riparian landscaping, and taking and treating the surface water off of Golden Gate Way in that vicinity. That's been kind of in the works for a while too, but we let that out to a consultant to finish that design, and that's just yet another thing that took much longer than we anticipated. So those 4 projects that will be kind of added to our ongoing projects right now. And then at the back of the burner is still this BART project that we've been talking about for 4 years. It was funded, it was defunded, it was refunded, it was switched over to BART to be the primary. We're still waiting on some agreements back and forth. I anticipate we'll get to that in 2023, and that is simply a pathway and a bike station connecting the town center development there to the south side of the BART station. It also has a nice art project, and it'll be a nice project when we get to it, but it's apparently hasn't been in a hurry to get done by anybody. So we're hoping maybe 2023 will actually start some construction. So with that, I'd like to share my screen. And let's see. And just look at next year's projects. And are you all seeing my spreadsheet up there?
Yes.
Okay. So the capital improvement program for fiscal year 22-23, starting just these pavement maintenance items, 1, 2, 3, 4 up here. Olympic Boulevard, which was a project that basically the total of Olympic Boulevard within the city limits from Ridley Station to just east of Pleasant Hill Road. It's up for repaving anyway, but it's got a pretty expensive price tag surrounded by it. And the reason for that is we've also been asked to consider modifications to the roundabout to improve traffic safety, particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists through and around the roundabout. So that would be, we'd call this more of a complete streets project. We would improve the bike lanes on Olympic. We may change the entrance and exits of the roundabout off of Pleasant Hill Road and off of Olympic. We may try and slow down the traffic through the traffic circle itself, maybe with changing the chicanes in and out. So it's a pretty pricey project if you thought it was just repaving Olympic Boulevard, but it includes quite a few other things surrounding really active transportation safety. We do have some sections on St. Mary's Road. You see Florence to North Lucille and Glenside to Woodview Drive. Those are primarily resurfacing. And then also Glenside Drive. And Glenside Drive would also have some pathway improvements or reconstruction of pathways along the side. Those are existing pathways similar to what we did on Reelys Valley Road this last year. So that's the bulk of the paving projects. There are 2 other specific pathway projects. One is a continuation of what we started last year, but in another section of Reelys Valley Road. It's a pathway reconstruction that's just further west or sort of northwest, if you will, of the project we did last year, where we have really a failing retaining wall, and we need to reconstruct that and reconstruct the pathway that it sits on. And then Pleasant Hill pathway, just between Reelys Valley and Spring Hill Road. This is also an existing pathway that we want to improve, and we also want to protect the pathway from vehicle traffic. It may consist of a guardrail along that section to protect it. Right now, it's open with just a berm and 50-mile-an-hour traffic very nearby, or there is a small fence there that probably would not stop a vehicle should it veer in the wrong direction over that pathway as well. So 2 specific pathway projects. And then for the new one, and I will add that we've had a lot of discussion on this safety improvements near schools, and there's a $1.3 million price tag on this. And I will share that over $600,000 of this has already been to the city council for their approval of funding for these projects. This is something that the council made a priority to improve safety, particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists, and particularly near schools for school-age children, but for adults alike. So we have utilized a consultant to come and do some analysis and look around the schools. We've had several Transportation and Circulation Commission meetings and public meetings, and we've come up with some recommendations. The first 3 schools have been to the council for their proofing already. We have 4 more schools that have been to Transportation and Circulation Commission, but not yet the council. They'll get there, not this next meeting because they had a full agenda, but the one after that, I anticipate. But the total amount of those projects is going to be about $1.3 million. And this is doing things like adding flashing beacon crossings, filling in gaps of sidewalks, making mid-block crossings, changing the signing and striping in places. It's got quite a few things, and this is looking at all 7 schools, 7 including the Mayor White Pony School, and that was included because that is, although a private school, it's located on the school district's property, so they basically are taking ownership of it as the owner of the property. So we looked at the Mayor White Pony School, as well as the 4 elementary schools, Stanley Middle and Acalanes High School. So several things going on there. It's a pretty high price tag. To fund that, we've got to use, the only source that seems to be available to me is the fees that we're going to receive or have received from Palos, Colorado's development project, so those impact fees. And that would be utilized for those projects. I have here as PED and bike safety improvement design. That hasn't been approved yet, but it's something that a council member made a comment that they'd like to see it happen. And that would likely be for a design for First Street, which would connect the Lafayette Moraga Trail to the First Street multi-use pathway in a more formal, permanent pathway. As part of our safety improvements near schools, we're looking at removing parking, but just utilizing literally delineators and paint to do that, so that it's dedicated for bicyclists, which would make better lines of sight for drivers, provide bicyclists a dedicated place to be separate from vehicles and pedestrians. We do think it will add to some of the safety and reduce some of the chaos that happens when junior high and elementary schools start school and end school each school day. So, but this would be a design for a permanent project that would basically expand the multi-purpose trail and connect it and get you closer to downtown from the Lafayette Moraga Trail. Not sure if that's going to happen. And then I have Buckeye Fields patio. This is Parks, Trails, and Recreation's best guess at which project they would like to focus on next year. They have several, and they're in the 5-year plan. They're kind of placeholders because PTR has to go through their process to see what their funding is. But the Buckeye Fields patio is very uneven. There's always a lot of expansion and contraction with that patio. So there are some repairs and some stabilization that needs to be done there. So that's what this project is as kind of a placeholder. So those are the scopes and the types of projects we have proposed for next year. And this is the table, if you will, that I'm looking for your input for. Yes, this is all conforming to our general plan. We don't see anything out of the extraordinary here. But at the same time, looking ahead, because I do have a 5-year proposed plan, and it'll give you an idea of Parks, Trails, and Recreation's other projects. 2024, more of the same as far as pavement maintenance and surface seal. And I'll make a comment at this point that for 2023 and 2024, engineering is specifically staying away from our downtown streets, Moraga Road at the T of Mount Diablo Boulevard and Mount Diablo itself, First Street, Oak Hill, etc. I will say that originally, if you looked at this a few years ago, some of those streets we would have been looking at already for this year or next year, but we have deferred those streets because the downtown specific plan has been asked to be updated, and we want to wait until those updates have been finalized and adopted so that any project we do downtown would be in conformance to the newest updated downtown specific plan. So these various streets will basically probably focus more on residential streets again next year. We've got our collectors. When I say next year, I mean 2024. We've got our collectors for 23, the St. Mary's and the Olympic and the Glenside. And then as a placeholder, the community center roof and HVAC system, similar to the restrooms, they're in need of renovation and updating. So there's a placeholder for that one. For 2025, this is where we would come back and get towards downtown. I mentioned just a minute ago, Moraga Road was one of the streets we were looking at maybe for 2022 or 2023. Now we've pushed it out a few years to see what that downtown specific plan comes up with. So this would be a complete streets project that we would look at for Moraga Road between St. Mary's and Mount Diablo Boulevard. We would expect to be looking at bikeways, widening sidewalks, looking at traffic flow, maybe adding some smart signals in there to improve some of the vehicle flow as well. So it's a pretty substantial project, and we listed it as just its only paving project that year. But then we've got a couple Parks, Trails, and Recreation projects. Buckeye Fields parking lot or the community park parking lot or both will need some resurfacing, and likely anything we do with those parking lots will also incorporate green infrastructure where we capture the stormwater and put in bioretention basins or some other filtration system so that stormwater is not going directly to a storm drain system but being filtered for bioremediation prior to discharge, whether it's infiltration to groundwater or overflow that's eventually run off onto a storm drain or into an open ditch. So, and then they also are looking at a community park playground equipment update. Moving on, we'll have more downtown streets we anticipate, Mount Diablo Boulevard here, and possibly turf at Buckeye Fields, could also be community park, which I think it just flips with 2027. Again, more downtown streets, Oak Hill, First Street, Deer Hill, and then the community park fields turf update. So pretty much it's a balance of parks, trails, and recreation projects and paving projects and maintenance. That's what we know at this time. But again, going back to this table, the Olympic, St. Mary's, Glenside, as well as the pathways here on Pleasant Hill Road and Reilly's Valley, and likely some work at Buckeye Fields, the existing patio deck out there, along with possibly some design for a multi-purpose pathway. That's the scope of the proposal for 2023. Of these projects, we've only started design, I'd say, on the Pleasant Hill Road pathway. So these are proposed projects and just looking for the Planning Commission's opinion on whether or not they are conforming to Lafayette's general plan.
Okay, thank you. At this point, before we get into any type of discussion, because we are going to take public comment, I would like to invite commissioners to ask any clarifying questions. And then we can save kind of discussion of items till after. So Commissioner Parson.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Mike. I have a quick question about the Olympic Boulevard roundabout. You mentioned also doing some potential, let's just call them safety improvements and just leave it at that colloquially. And I'm not asking you for anything legal, just because there was obviously an unfortunate death that occurred there. If we're approving this, has there been some discussion with City Council on that moving forward before anything gets resolved with that matter with that individual? Does that question make sense to you? I just, is that part of the remediation that the City Council is going to wait on to see if that is resolved or not? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense. I will say that the city council's involvement thus far with the safety improvements to the roundabout has been at a subcommittee level. There have been council member representatives who have met with bike advocates and city staff and a Trans-Circ commissioner, and we've had field meetings, and we brought in an outside consultant to just brainstorm, if you will. So based on those, and we've had 2 or 3 meetings and some back and forth with emails. This project has not come before the council specifically yet, and I will outline that those safety improvements or these changes to this configuration of that roundabout and the intersection approaching and leaving it is a significant cost. So they'll have to make that decision on whether or not to move forward with that or just do the resurfacing as we can. But there has been pretty good involvement from multiple entities leading in the planning process leading up to this, enough so that I felt comfortable enough to price it out and put it in here for consideration for construction.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I have one other quick question. Setting aside this capital improvements project and repaving just as a whole, when we have, let's just making this up, we have a big old pothole somewhere on one of the streets we're not talking about. Where do those funds come from generally when we go fix them, so to speak?
Yeah, so the public works side, and I am the public works director and city engineer, has an operating budget that includes that, and sometimes it's just the cold patch, right? And sometimes I have to bring out a general contractor that's going to do a hot mix paving to do a more permanent patch. So that's kind of ongoing throughout the year, and we do anticipate that and have an operating budget for that.
Great.
Same with the knockdown sign.
Got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mason, please.
Similar questions to Commissioner Farzan about the roundabout. Obviously, the roundabout hasn't been around that long. We are making changes or proposing changes. 2 questions. One is, what expertise are we bringing in now that we didn't have later, or what additional information just generally are we using to revise the design? And second, is it working within the existing footprint, or are we thinking about essentially expanding it to give more room to the merging lanes by expanding into adjacent properties or something like that? Thank you.
So, yeah, let me answer the second part of that first. We're not looking at expanding into adjacent properties. We would be looking at working within the existing footprint and actually maybe merging lanes prior to getting to the roundabout if you're headed, for example, southbound on Pleasant Hill Road, rather than having 2 lanes that could enter simultaneously. So that's one of the things. We did have a roundabout specialist design this roundabout for us, and there's just different sides of the equations on roundabouts. If you look at this from a traffic engineering standpoint, the roundabout is a big success. If you were ever caught up in the backup coming down Relay Station Road to get through that intersection at peak travel times, it could take quite a while to get through because it was an always stop at Pleasant Hill and Olympic. So one thing roundabouts do is they move vehicle traffic through. Having said that, they're not designed for bicyclists to go through, not really, or pedestrians. Now, to do that, we did design bypasses for bicyclists or pedestrians, and you can get around the roundabout. And in fact, we've actually added a flashing beacon crossing for one leg of crossing Pleasant Hill Road if you're, on that north side of the roundabout crossing Pleasant Hill Road, which is a safety improvement. But if you're an avid bicyclist and you're riding from the Lafayette Moraga Trail and you're going to the Canal Trail in Walnut Creek and you're headed down Olympic, and many cyclists do take that route, you're not taking the sidewalk or pathway bypass. You're riding with the vehicles. So one of the things that's been being considered is to really slow the speed entering and in the traffic circle itself.
Okay, thank you, because I know I had similar concerns. Nothing regarding traffic, it's just as you make the dedicated, say from Pleasant Hill to Olympic, make the dedicated right turn. If the bicyclist is coming through at speed and hugging the outside, it's a 90-degree or more look back, and sometimes it's tough. You don't see them. If the bicyclist is hugging the center of the inside, it's a different story. And so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good comment.
Any other questions for public comment? I have two. Do you mind pulling back up your spreadsheet for the 20? I think the tab was 2023R. Or I guess I have three questions. Okay,
Is this it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. Row,
Okay.
on your Excel row 16, the Relays Valley Road pathway. I thought I heard you say
Yes.
that, yeah, so I thought I heard you say that along there right now is just a little berm and people are going 50. So I have Google Earth on my other screen. Is this actually on Relays Valley Road, or is it Pleasant Hill Road at Relays Valley? Or did I
Sorry.
mishear the wrong one?
Yeah. So, or maybe I said it incorrectly because I could have been mixing them up. So the 50-mile-an-hour speed I'm referring to are vehicles on Pleasant Hill Road. So it'd actually be row 15, if you will.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the section along Pleasant Hill Road. Yeah. And you would anticipate slower speeds, but 30 miles an hour still on Relays Valley Road. But that particular comment I made I meant it to be regarding the Pleasant Hill Road pathway and just that short section there between Spring Hills Road and Relays Valley Road on the west side of Pleasant Hill Road, the school side. Yeah.
Yeah, I might have misheard you, but that's helpful. Thanks. And then for row 6, St. Mary's Road between Florence and North Lucille, is that between Florence and South Lucille, or is the intent really where North Lucille hits St. Mary's, which is by the community center?
You are absolutely right, and I'm sorry. I actually have this corrected in another table. My apologies. It is South Lucille.
Yeah.
North Lucille doesn't. Yeah, doesn't
that's
connect.
fine.
Yeah.
And then on.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to point out that you're wrong. I just was trying to visualize where
I found it too, but unfortunately, I have this table in a few places and I didn't correct it everywhere. So my apologies.
All good. And then do you mind going to the 2024 tab, please?
Sure.
Yeah, so this is for the community center roof and HVAC system. I was just wondering, if they're replacing the roof at the community center, do they also look into the potential of solar and stuff like that on a roof? Or is this strictly, not saying you should or shouldn't, just curious, because I know you don't put solar on an old roof. Is it something the city looks into or no?
So I would say it is something that the city would look into. I mean, we looked into it when we built the library. I'm looking into it out at the corporation yard. I would say one thing about the community center site is it's a very treed site.
Yeah, that's what I was
There's
gonna
a
say.
lot of
There's a lot of
shade
trees.
there. It's probably not the most efficient location to put solar out of, every place in Lafayette. I think it would always get some consideration. We did not put it at the Jennifer Russell building, which actually probably has a little better exposure on average, probably in part because you're always just limited on funding. And it's a pretty good capital cost up front.
Yeah, okay. I second not cutting down all the trees at the community center, or I would support not cutting them all down. Okay, those are my clarifying questions. Thank you. Any others before public comment? Okay, Nancy, if we could please open it up for public comments. This is an opportunity if anyone would like to provide comment on this item? Now would be the time to raise your hand.
I'm bringing in Abby Bateman.
Great.
Good
Welcome.
evening, planning commissioners and staff. Mike, good to see you again in another venue late at night. I'm joining to say thank you for your discussion of Vision Zero and Complete Streets and looking at the safety around schools. I appreciate that being incorporated in the discussion in the staff report and in your discussion with the Planning Commission. I have one request is that the Complete Streets amendment to the general plan that was adopted a number of years ago isn't hyperlinked on the general plan page, and so it's really hard to find it. So I guess that's a request to staff or the commission, if there's a way to make the Complete Streets amendment more accessible, because I ended up going back looking through council staff reports trying to find what version, and then I wasn't sure if there were edits to it and had to go to the next thing to look at I'm sure it's somewhere more easily found. I couldn't find it. So if there's a quick way to hyperlink that in the Excel table that's there, that would be great. I think it would help with some of these conversations and really looking at, are things consistent and pulling together when we start looking at the downtown plan as well as Vision Zero with Complete Streets. The other question I have for staff and the commission is that I don't expect things to change dramatically over the next year in terms of the funding horizon, but there does seem to be a large push from the federal government around Complete Streets, school safety, bike ped safety. And we're seeing that come out of this administration with some of the infrastructure funding. And if there were opportunities for city staff and others to pursue funding opportunities, do we need to queue up more projects than we actually have funding for to be ready to go and apply for those things? Or is that setting ourselves up for a false sense of what people are going to expect and then we don't really have funding? So I guess I just want to throw that out there with what we're seeing on the funding horizon. How do we set ourselves up to be positioned to move quickly to get those funds, since we do have policies in place and plans in the works? And so those were just my questions, but overall, I just want to really say thank you for incorporating so much of the safety opportunities into the CIP. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I'll first ask if there's questions for the speaker.
And I apologize, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Abby Bateman. I live in Burton Valley. Sorry. And I will be quiet now. Thank you.
It's okay. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate your comment. I don't see any questions for you, but I will maybe ask staff to just think about the questions that the speaker asked. And after public comments are done, if you're able to provide a response, that would be appreciated. Any other public speakers?
Yes, there's Lauren McCabe.
Kind of that cut out, Nancy. Lauren
McCabe Herpick.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Commission. Hi, thank you. Good to see you. I think this is my first Planning Commission comment, so I'm making the round. So I'm glad to finally get to you guys. But yeah, I wanted to echo what Abby said and just thank you and Mike especially for working with the Vision Zero planning as well as Safe Streets, and just always. I think the reason why we all wanted to be on this call tonight was just sort of to just make it known and reiterate the fact that this is important. So as you guys are looking at projects moving forward, in addition to around our schools immediately, but also as we create sort of these connector points outside of the downtown, because we are going through this downtown specific plan process. One of the areas that comes to mind, especially as Glenside between Michael and St. Mary's is on the list. And I apologize because I know it kind of splits. If it's not the correct corridor between Michael and Glenside. So if it's the south below the bridge or north, I'm particularly thinking of sort of the north side where Glenside and St. Mary's comes at the intersection, sort of almost like at that fork in the road, by the Hamlin open space. And that's another place I kind of wanted to just bring the commission's attention as you look at resurfacing projects there. The Parks, Trails and Recreation Commission, they purchased the Hamlin open space. They are doing, it's going to take a while, doing some work on how to make that space publicly accessible. I know one of the major concerns for the neighbors around the Hamlin space was the influx of parking and the influx of cars coming into their neighborhood. And for me, as someone who uses the Lafayette Marga Trail on my bike and walking, having access through that through non-vehicular modes would be great. So, and that follows sort of the Vision Zero mentality of how do we create intermodal transportation that's not just the car. So as you're looking specifically at that Glenside connection, and again, if it's the correct way that I'm thinking to St. Mary's, I would love for this planning commission to kind of be part of the conversation of looking at how we can make that connection from the Lafayette Moraga Trail to the open space, or at least getting it to that sort of fork in the road point where someone would be able to safely be able to cross St. Mary's and access the open space. Because I don't know if you were able to take the audio tour that we put together last year, but it's in a beautiful space. It's definitely a special part of Lafayette that I hope that we can all enjoy. And having different ways of getting there, I think would not only be appreciative to the public, but also to the neighbors that surround Hamlin. So again, just wanted to say thank you for being part of this. Thank you, Mike, for helping to kind of put the Vision Zero mentality at the forefront of the Planning Commission as you look at these repaving projects, and especially too, because if you don't know me already, my heart belongs with Parks, Trails, and Recreation, and so getting more people to be able to bike and walk to our parks, and having really fantastic parks like Brook Street would be fantastic. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Okay.
Next, I'm bringing in Megan Mittman.
Thank you. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Megan Mittman. I live in Burton Valley, and I just wanted to comment on the Burton Valley portion of the CIP and to extend my appreciation, as the previous speakers have mentioned, about just looking for ways to institutionalize Vision Zero into our everyday things that we're doing in the city, in addition to some of the overt kind of Vision Zero specific projects that I know that are planned. And specifically, I just wanted to point out that the Glenside resurfacing, and my hope that we really focus on thinking about the Safe Routes to School components of that project. The recent Safe Routes to School efforts have looked kind of really adjacent to the schools, right? So we've been looking like right in front of Burton Valley, right in front of Stanley. But I really feel like when you think of this concept of the level of traffic stress, which is what keeps people from being willing to bike because they're too stressed, it's the weakest link in the entire kind of route that they would be riding that determines how stressful the ride is. And I really feel like that jog, as you go across Burton, over the bridge in front of Las Trampas and the church there to access the trail, is the most stressful part of the ride from Burton Valley to Stanley Middle School. And so even though we've been focusing on the immediate pieces adjacent to Stanley, as we think about biking access, really getting that wiggle and getting that access to the trail to be a lot less stressful and a more comfortable. There's just a lot happening there, and there's no facilities for people really to walk. It's very narrow, but certainly for people to bike. So I'm hopeful that when we do the repaving, that can incorporate looking at that, and that may well be why that's the larger price tag. But just really want to underscore the importance of that one, and a project that I think has been missing from some of the recent Safe Routes to School conversations, because it's not right next to either one of the schools, but in my mind, a real missing critical link to make that bike ride to Stanley possible. Thanks for the chance to comment.
Thank you. Can I just ask, when you said, I'm just trying to vision it, You said the trail in front of the church, so by Las Trampas, right there. Are you talking about when you say the bridge, literally the roadway bridge, not the bridge on the trail?
Exactly. Yeah, kind of the bridge over the creek that Glenside is on.
Yeah,
so
to
that's
then get to Burnham Valley. Yeah.
right. So you have to do that kind of wiggle across the bridge over to get on the trail. And that's just kind of really, I think, a gnarly part. There's a lot of traffic coming in there in the morning with everybody kind of snaking in over to school. And all the kids have to go kind of diagonally through that intersection and then go across the creek overpass and then get on. So if we can, as part of the repaving, just really rationalize that and make that a lot more intuitive, make the bicyclist movements clear and expectations clear to everybody who's maneuvering through there, I think that could be really helpful.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you, Megan.
Thanks so much.
There are no raised hands.
Okay, thank you. So I did hear a couple questions specifically, just kind of asking staff. I heard links, making links more accessible on the city's website to any relevant documents or plans. And then I heard a question, Mike, funding versus an actual project list, right? Like potential future funding. Is there anything you'd like to speak to at this time or clarify?
I can just, sure, I could briefly comment. Per Abby's comment, I did note the Complete Streets Amendment and a request for a more accessible link. I don't know where it is, but I made a note to get with Therese. We still don't have a transportation planner at this time. I'm expecting one. I don't know where it is, but I can certainly research it, and I did write it down. Regarding the question really the question is, should we have projects on the shelf to make ourselves and put ourselves in a better position to gain grant funding? I think the answer actually is yes, and we're looking at doing that. And that $200,000 placeholder for possibly a design of a active transportation pathway, multipurpose pathway near two schools is an example of that. Another example would be, we are currently working on a design because we got design funding from Rebecca Bauer Cahan's, Assemblymember Cahan's office for the Pleasant Hill Road pathway down the center of Pleasant Hill Road. So we're working on that design. That's another one we want to have on our shelves because we think that those would be good projects to go after grant funding for. So we are trying to get ahead a little bit. And yes, it would help if you have more than just a concept, closer to a completed design. They want you closer to shovel ready for some funding. I will still reiterate, Lafayette does not compete well for a lot of grants that are out there right now. Even all this ARPA funding, a lot of it is going to be funneled to disadvantaged communities. A lot of it is going to be set aside for maybe larger projects or grouped with larger projects. Even though we hear these big numbers and think we're all going to have great amounts of money to do these projects in the future, I'm not sure that that's really true. We are tracking it. We have Townsend helping us look for these grant opportunities. But I want to manage expectations that it's still going to be tough to get the funding.
Thank you. Commissioner Mason.
Thank you. Just two quick questions / comments. One is in the multimodal transportation. And I'm specifically thinking about around Stanley Middle School, the sidewalk on the north side. Please make sure you consider handicap wheelchair access, because I know there you've got the telephone poles that intrude into the sidewalk, and there's little carve outs, but it is a little tight there. And if you're going to put more people into there, I want to make sure that their safety is addressed also. And then the second is, I didn't see anything on there. I'm assuming it's somewhere in the queue, is just at least planning for access to the Batwing property for the parks, because I don't see a clear point of access there that would be readily available to a majority of the people. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be honest, that is not part of any of these projects, but it is. So weatherizing the Batwing property and some, I think that's going to have to come as part of a PTR project. And the section on Glenside that is in this next year's project is not the section that is closest to the St. Mary's Y, if you will, and that gets you over to that Batwing. So it's not something that would be part of this next year's project, because we're at another location, the other L of Glenside, if you will, out towards St. Mary's Road, up towards the pool and the church and the bridge that we were talking about just a few minutes ago. So understood. I'm not sure what we'll do for access there, but we definitely want foot traffic to be able to get to our new open space. There are several projects affiliated with that open space, and it's something that between Parks, Trails, and Rec and Engineering, we're going to have to work out. It's not planned yet. It does not mean it wouldn't happen within this next 5 year, but it has to have funding and it has to be prioritized.
Thank you.
Okay. So I still welcome any comments from the commission. I'm just looking on my other screen at the agenda. So for this item, we're reviewing the staff report and the proposed 5-year plan. And then we're being asked if we're able to find the proposed plan or program, improvement program list to be in conformance with the general plan. So Nancy, do you need a formal motion from us to make a recommendation to City Council for this, or what are you looking for from the Planning Commission on this side? Oh, sorry, Mike, what are you looking for?
Well, I would just say for item 2, yes, it's definitely standard to have a motion and to take action. For item 1, that's more I'm receiving your input and taking these comments and even from the public, and I'll try and act on those as appropriate. But for item 2, yes, it is basically that when we take this to the council for funding, I will say that it's also been to the Planning Commission for conformance with the general plan, and it's been reviewed by our Capital Projects Assessment Committee prior to that, just so there's this trail of the process that we went through before we request the funding from.
Okay, thank you. So understanding that, or hearing that, I should say, I'm still not clear if we need a motion, because I'm not sure what the motion would be since we made some recommendations. So Nancy, can you help me out here, please?
Aren't we? No, I'm sorry.
Or Commissioner Farzan, please.
Sorry, I apologize.
No, I will gladly take anyone's recommendation. I'm tired.
Yeah, I mean, we've done this before. I think we're just basically moving. We're proposing, essentially, I'm looking at number 2, but we did this last year and the year before. Essentially, we're basically proposing that the 2022, 2023 are in conformance with general plan, and then we vote on that. And then Mike moves this on to the city council, and then they take the next steps going forward. But we do have to officially say that it's in conformance with the general plan.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're not making a motion that it be moved on. We're making a finding that it is in conformance with the general plan. Okay, would anyone like to make a motion in that regard? Commissioner Farzan, thank you.
I'm happy to do that. Before I do that, I want to just reiterate, I think Vision Zero is essential for our community. I think anything we can do for bike pedestrian safety, and particularly around schools and areas that kids take, we should be focused in on. If we're going to spend money, that should be a big focus for the city. I've said that for years. I just think it's so important for us. I'll just leave it at that. Now I'm going to make my motion. I move that the proposed 2022-2023 capital improvement program list is in conformance with Lafayette's general plan.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Farzan and a second by Commissioner Mason. And we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Farzan?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Mason?
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm?
Aye.
And Chair Radnich? Aye. So thank you. Sorry, Commissioner Farzan, did you have something else? No? Okay, just waving. Perfect. Okay, item 8, other business. 8A, ARC volunteer, May 27th. Or do we make, I don't know, Vice Chair Labange or Commissioner Heising? Do we volunteer them?
I like your style.
Let me check.
Both of them.
Yeah, we can both do it.
I can't do it. That I just did this last one, but I'm not available on the 27th. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't. It's the day after school gets out. I'm taking the kids to celebrate.
Here, I'll do it.
Thank you, Commissioner Mason. Park volunteer for May 27th. And item 8E.
Ooh.
Yeah, so sad, but very happy for Commissioner Maggio. Just tons and tons of appreciation, I think, from all of us on the Planning Commission. I'll let Nancy, chime in for staff, but I know the sentiments are the same. I think everyone just wishes you the best, luck in your next chapter, and congratulations. You will be missed. I think you're a wonderful addition to Planning Commission, and the 12 years you've spent off and on over the years on Planning Commission. I know you're very active in other groups in Lafayette, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's just really been a privilege to serve with all of you. I've particularly with the challenges with COVID. I mean, the thing that I really missed was not being able to see you or even meet half of you in person once over the last 2 years, which has just been very strange. So it's been a very different 2 years than my previous 10 years on the Planning Commission. Lots of challenges, but it's been a really great experience, and I want to thank you all for contributing to that. So you'll see me with my farmer's tan and a big hat out in these urban farms, mostly in the East County these days.
That's great.
Thanks.
I'm just speaking for myself. I know it has been an absolute pleasure, and it's not just from the Planning Commission, but I will just say for the community at large. The community was lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Working for it.
Thank you.
And as far as I'm concerned, most of us are new. So what we're really going to miss is your institutional knowledge of the city and how things work in the Planning Commission. So thank you for all that you've contributed, and thank you for helping to bring at least my knowledge base up on how this works.
Oh, thank you.
And you got to be with us for the terraces, right? Were you right, or did you come on right afterwards?
Yeah, no, you were chair.
Yeah,
You came on as chair. Yeah.
That gave me a lot of reassurance, knowing that you had been with that project from the beginning, and your advice on how to sort of help us talk and move things along and pull out, build consensus. And I appreciate the way that you talked about those things with me when we chatted.
Well, you all do a fine job. You ask really interesting questions. You really kind of tease things out. And I think we have much better projects as a result. So keep up the good work, and I will occasionally watch. Thank you.
Thank you.
At a normal time during the day, because it'll be recorded.
Yeah.
Does staff have anything else on that item, or at this point, Nancy? I mean,
Gina Dawson is has her hand raised. I think she wants to make a comment on this as well.
that'd be great.
Hey,
Welcome.
thank you. Hey, it's dark in here. Sorry. You think I'd have my lighting down. But Karen, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of your service throughout these many years and these particular, years on Planning Council just recently. So I thank you. You're inspirational, and I look forward to seeing you and still calling upon you for various advice and mentorship. Just thanks you for all you've done for the city and your service. So, and I figured, you're up late, and I wanted to say goodbye and see you just at this point. Not goodbye, but see you around, I'm sure.
Thanks, Gene. It's a late one. Wow.
Well,
But you're used to that now.
It was on the consent.
Not compared to
No, I want to be able to see you and your with your working team here, and thank you all.
Great team.
But definitely you'll be missed on the commission, as well as just in general. So, but we'll see you about, and I'm excited for you for your next thing. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Gina.
you all, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay. Item 9, commissioners report. Oh, Commissioner Parson.
It's not really a commissioner's report per se, but I'm just going to pass along some information. I know we just did the housing element, and I remember the ADUs, and the number we used was a question that we all had and kept going back and forth a lot. And again, I know somebody who's in Atherton, which is a quarter of the size of Lafayette. They proposed 35 units per year, which is 3 times what we did. So I just find it interesting. It's just something for the staff and the city council to kind of think about going forward, because there was a lot of bigger cities versus small, et cetera. But Atherton feels confident they can get 35 a year in. I think we landed at 13, if I remember correctly. So just a note. That's it. Thank you.
I have a GPAC update. Actually missed last week's meeting. It was supposed to be tomorrow. It got rescheduled. I think tomorrow's Taste of Lafayette. So that was rescheduled for last week, and it was a debrief based off of an in-person debrief that we had, kind of to meet and discuss things that were working, things that could be maybe improved upon, kind of reset goals for the GPAC. And so that meeting happened last week. So GPAC at this point now is back to the 3rd Tuesday of the month at 6 o'clock, with exception to tomorrow, but back in June. And then planning director's report. I know Greg's not here, but Nancy, is there anything on item 10?
I didn't really anything to discuss with the commission, but I want to echo with everyone else. Thank you for your service, Karen. And that plaque has some extra room on the side, so if you ever decide to come back, there's some more years that could be added on.
That's awesome. Okay, 10:11, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
Karen.
week. Bye, Karen.